He can't be my mail-order husband. Lillian Hart's whisper shattered the stillness of her porch as the stagecoach door swung open, revealing a face she'd tried desperately to forget. Cole Maddox, the cowboy who'd saved her from death 2 years ago, stood before her, dust-covered and impossibly real. Fate had just delivered her greatest salvation and her deepest fear in one devastating moment. Stay with me until the end of this story, and comment which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels across the world. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Crimson Valley, turning the main street into a ribbon of shimmering heat that made the distant mountains waver like mirages. Lillian Hart stood on her weathered porch, one hand gripping the wooden post so tightly her knuckles had gone white, the other pressed against her chest as if she could physically slow her racing heart. The stagecoach was late, nearly an hour past its scheduled arrival, and with every passing minute, the knot of anxiety in her stomach had tightened until she could barely breathe. She'd changed her dress 3 times that morning. The first had seemed too eager, the second too plain, and now she wore a modest blue calico that she hoped struck the right balance between welcoming and reserved. Her dark hair, streaked with premature threads of silver at 28, was pinned back in a simple bun that already felt too tight against her skull. Wisps had escaped in the heat, curling against her damp neck. "You're going to wear a hole in those floorboards," came a voice from the doorway behind her. Lillian glanced back to see Martha Hendricks, her neighbor and closest friend in this godforsaken frontier town, standing with her arms crossed and a knowing smile playing at her lips. Martha was everything Lillian wasn't: confident, settled, secure in her place in the world. She'd been married to Samuel Hendricks for 15 years and had 4 children to show for it. She wore her contentment like armor. "I can't help it," Lillian admitted, turning back to scan the horizon. "What if he's awful, Martha? What if I've made a terrible mistake?" "What if he's wonderful?" Martha countered, stepping out onto the porch. The boards creaked under her weight. "What if he's exactly what you've been praying for?" Lillian let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "I haven't prayed in 2 years, not since—" She stopped herself, but Martha knew. Everyone in Crimson Valley knew. 2 years ago, Lillian had been traveling from St. Louis to San Francisco to join her fiancé, a banker who'd promised her a life of comfort and respectability. The stagecoach had been ambushed by the Garrett gang 20 miles outside of Crimson Valley. 3 passengers had died that day. Lillian would have been the 4th, if not for a cowboy who'd appeared out of nowhere, guns blazing, and fought off 5 armed men like something out of a dime novel. She'd never learned his name. He'd ridden away before she could thank him properly, disappearing into the desert like smoke. But she'd never forgotten his face, the sharp angles of his jaw, the scar that cut through his left eyebrow, the eyes that held equal measures of violence and gentleness. Her fiancé had broken their engagement 2 weeks later, claiming he couldn't marry a woman who'd been compromised by such traumatic circumstances. The bastard. She'd settled in Crimson Valley instead, using what little money she had left to buy a small plot of land and a house that was barely more than a shack. She'd been alone ever since, scraping by on laundry and mending work, watching the years slip past like water through her fingers. Until 3 months ago, when loneliness had finally driven her to write to a mail-order husband agency in Denver. The correspondence had been brief, businesslike. She'd used her middle name, Marie, instead of Lillian, a small act of self-protection that now felt foolish. The man who'd answered her advertisement had signed his letters simply as CM, and his words had been sparse but kind. He was a ranch hand, he'd written, looking for a fresh start and a good woman to build a life with. He didn't drink to excess, didn't gamble, and could work with his hands. He'd be arriving on the afternoon stage on the 15th of June. Today was the 15th of June. "There," Martha said suddenly, pointing. "I see dust." Lillian's heart jumped into her throat. Sure enough, a cloud of dust was rising in the distance, moving steadily closer along the rutted road that served as Crimson Valley's main thoroughfare. The stagecoach. Her future, rattling toward her at 8 miles per hour. "I think I'm going to be sick," Lillian whispered. Martha squeezed her shoulder. "You're going to be fine. Better than fine. You're going to be happy, Lil. You deserve to be happy." Did she? Lillian wasn't sure anymore. Happiness felt like something that happened to other people, People who hadn't watched fellow passengers die in pools of their own blood. People who hadn't been discarded like damaged goods. The stagecoach grew larger, details emerging from the heat shimmer. The driver's hat. The team of 4 horses, their coats dark with sweat. The Wells Fargo logo painted on the door. Lillian's hands began to tremble. She clasped them together, trying to project a calm she absolutely did not feel. The stage rolled to a stop in front of the general store, directly across the dusty street from Lillian's house. The driver, a grizzled man named Pete, whom she'd known since arriving in town, set the brake and climbed down with the stiffness of someone who'd been sitting for too long. He opened the passenger door with a flourish that seemed almost mocking under the circumstances. "Afternoon, Miss Hart," he called out, tipping his hat to her. "Got a delivery for you?" A boot appeared in the doorway, then a leg. Then a man stepped down from the coach, and the entire world seemed to tilt sideways. No, it couldn't be. It wasn't possible. But there he was, standing in the dust and sunlight of Crimson Valley, the same man who'd haunted her dreams for 2 years, taller than she remembered, broader through the shoulders, his face more lined than it had been, but unmistakably, impossibly, him. The scar through his left eyebrow, the strong jaw, the eyes that had looked at her with such fierce protectiveness as he'd pulled her from the wreckage of the stagecoach and told her, in a voice like gravel, "You're safe now. I promise you're safe." He wore the same type of clothes he'd worn that day, dusty trousers, a work shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle, boots that had seen 1,000 miles of hard country. A battered hat shaded his face, but she could see enough, more than enough. "He can't be my mail-order husband." The words escaped her lips in a whisper that felt torn from her chest. "He's the man who saved my life." The stranger, not a stranger, never a stranger, turned at the sound of her voice. Their eyes met across the width of the street, and Lillian watched recognition slam into him like a physical blow. He went absolutely still, one hand frozen on the brim of his hat, his expression cycling through shock, disbelief, and something she couldn't quite name. "Lillian?" he said, and the sound of her name in his voice sent a shiver down her spine despite the oppressive heat. "Lillian Hart?" She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare at him like he was a ghost made flesh. Martha's hand tightened on her shoulder. "Lil, do you know this man?" Did she know him? She knew the sound of his guns firing in defense of her life. She knew the strength of his arms as he'd carried her to safety. She knew the nightmares that woke her gasping in the dark, nightmares where he didn't arrive in time, where the outlaw's bullets found their mark, and she died in that desert without ever knowing his name. But she didn't know him. Not really. Not at all. He crossed the street slowly, deliberately, like he was approaching a spooked horse. Pete the driver was pulling luggage from the boot of the coach, oblivious to the crackling tension in the air. A few townspeople had stopped to watch. News of Lillian's mail-order husband had spread through Crimson Valley like wildfire, and everyone was curious to see what kind of man would answer such an advertisement. When he reached the base of her porch steps, he removed his hat completely, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. Up close, she could see new scars she didn't remember. A thin line along his jaw, another disappearing into his hairline. His eyes, she realized, were hazel, more green than brown in the afternoon light. "Ma'am," he said formally, and the word felt wrong coming from him, too distant after what they'd shared. "I'm Cole Maddox. I believe we've been corresponding?" Cole. His name was Cole. She'd spent 2 years not knowing, and now it sat between them like a gift she wasn't sure she wanted. "You signed your letters CM, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I used my middle name, Marie." Understanding flickered across his face. "Marie Hart, I didn't—" He trailed off, then tried again. "I had no idea it was you." "How could you?" The words came out sharper than she intended. "You never even told me your name. You just left." Something painful crossed his expression, there and gone in an instant. "I had to. I couldn't—" He stopped, glanced at Martha and the gathering crowd of onlookers, then looked back at Lillian. "Could we talk? Privately?" Every instinct screamed at her to say no, to send him back on the stagecoach, to protect herself from whatever chaos his presence was about to unleash on her carefully constructed life. But she couldn't. Not when he was looking at her like that, like she was water and he was dying of thirst. "Martha," she said without taking her eyes off Cole, "could you give us a moment?" Martha hesitated, clearly torn between propriety and concern, but finally nodded. "I'll be right inside if you need me." The threat in her voice was unmistakable. She squeezed past Cole on the steps, pausing just long enough to give him a warning look that could have curdled milk. When they were alone as they could be with half the town pretending not to watch, Lillian gestured to the chairs on her porch. "We should sit." "Thank you." He climbed the steps and took the chair farthest from hers, setting his hat on his knee. His hands, she noticed, were scarred across the knuckles. Working hands. Hands that had killed men to save her. Silence stretched between them, heavy and awkward. Lillian didn't know where to begin. There were too many questions, too many feelings tangled up inside her chest like barbed wire. Cole spoke first. "I've thought about you," he said quietly. "Every day for 2 years, I've wondered if you were all right, if you made it to San Francisco, if you were happy." "I didn't make it to San Francisco," she said flatly. "My fiancé decided he didn't want damaged goods." Cole's jaw tightened. Then he was a fool. Maybe. Or maybe he was smart to cut his losses. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the heat. "Why did you leave?" "That day. After the ambush. You vanished before I could even thank you." He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the dusty street. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough. "The Garrett gang. You know who they are? The men who attacked the stage. Their leader, Jacob Garrett, put a price on my head after that day. $500, dead or alive." He turned to look at her, and the weight of what he was saying hit her like a fist. "If I'd stayed, I'd have put you in danger. They'd have come looking for me, and anyone near me would have been fair game. I couldn't risk that. Not after—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "Not after watching you nearly die once already." Lillian felt the air leave her lungs. "You've been running for 2 years because of me?" "Not because of you, because of them." His voice hardened. "I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Every damn day I'd choose your life over mine." The words hung in the air between them, too big and too raw for the small porch. Lillian pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to organize her spinning thoughts. "But you're here now," she said. "Why? If you were running, why answer my advertisement? Why come to Crimson Valley?" Cole's expression shifted, became something darker. "Jacob Garrett is dead, shot trying to escape from the prison in Colorado Springs 3 months ago. The bounty died with him." He paused. "Or at least I thought it did." Something in his tone made her look up sharply. "What do you mean, you thought it did?" He met her eyes, and she saw fear there. Actual fear. 2 weeks ago, I heard rumors Garrett's younger brother Lucas took over what's left of the gang, and Lucas doesn't forgive or forget. Lillian's blood ran cold. "They're still after you." "I don't know for sure. The rumors could be just that, rumors. But I couldn't stay in Denver anymore, not without knowing." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. "When I saw your advertisement, Marie Hart, looking for a fresh start in a quiet town, it felt like a sign, a chance to disappear somewhere remote, somewhere I could build something decent with my life. I didn't know it was you. I swear on my life, I didn't know." She believed him. She could see the truth of it in every line of his face, but that didn't make any of this easier. "So what now?" she asked. "You came here to hide, and instead you found the one person who connects you directly to the Garretts. If Lucas is looking for you, and he finds out I'm here, then I'll leave." The words came quick and hard. "Tonight, if you want. I won't put you in danger again, Lillian. I won't." "And go where?" She heard the edge of frustration in her voice. "Keep running forever? That's not a life, Cole. Better than the alternative." "Which is what? Death? Or watching someone else die because of you?" She stood abruptly, began pacing the short length of the porch. "I've spent 2 years trying to rebuild my life. 2 years of washing other people's clothes and mending their tears and pretending I don't hear them whispering about me. The woman from the massacre. The woman who got abandoned. Poor Lillian Hart, all alone in that little house. She spun to face him. I answered that advertisement because I was tired of being alone, tired of being afraid. And now you're here, and you're telling me I should be afraid all over again? Cole stood too, and the movement brought him close enough that she could smell dust and leather and something else, something uniquely him. I'm saying you should be smart. The Garretts are dangerous, Lillian. They're not going to stop until what? Until you're dead? Until I'm dead? Until we're all dead? She laughed, and it came out bitter. I already died once, Cole. In that stagecoach, with bullets flying and blood everywhere and men screaming. I died, and then you brought me back. So forgive me if I'm not particularly interested in running away from shadows. They stood there, barely a foot apart, both breathing hard. She could see the pulse jumping in his throat, could see the war raging behind his eyes. You don't understand, he said quietly. Then make me understand. He looked away, jaw working. The last time I stayed somewhere too long, people got hurt. Good people. A family who gave me work when I needed it. Lucas Garrett's men burned their barn to the ground and shot their oldest son in the leg. He'll walk with a limp for the rest of his life because I was too selfish to keep moving. Lillian's anger deflated, replaced by something softer and more painful. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? He looked at her again, and she saw the guilt there, deep and festering. Every person who's suffered because of me, that's on my conscience. I can't add you to that list. I won't. Behind them, the door creaked open and Martha stuck her head out. Lillian, the stew's going to burn if someone doesn't stir it. It was a lie. There was no stew. But Lillian understood the message. Martha was giving her an out, a chance to end this conversation before it went somewhere she couldn't come back from. She should take it. She should thank Cole for coming, give him money for a return ticket to Denver, and close this chapter of her life for good. It would be the smart thing to do, the safe thing. But when had safety ever given her anything but loneliness? Stay for dinner, she heard herself say. Both of you. We can talk more after we've all had a chance to think. Cole opened his mouth, probably to refuse, but Martha cut him off. That's a fine idea. Mr. Maddox, you can wash up at the pump out back. Lillian, you come help me with that imaginary stew before I actually have to cook something. Before either of them could protest, Martha had herded Lillian inside and shut the door firmly behind them. Through the window, Lillian watched Cole stand on the porch for a long moment, staring at the closed door like it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Then he picked up his hat, settled it on his head, and walked around the side of the house toward the water pump. Are you out of your mind? Martha hissed the moment they were alone in the kitchen. That man is trouble, Lil. I can see it written all over him. He saved my life 2 years ago. And now he shows up on your doorstep with God knows what kind of danger following behind him. Martha grabbed a pot and started filling it with water from the bucket, moving with the aggressive efficiency of someone working out their frustration through domestic tasks. You don't owe him anything, don't I? Lillian leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. He took a bullet for me, Martha. Literally. He has a scar on his shoulder from where one of the Garretts shot him while he was carrying me to safety. I saw it that day, saw the blood, and he didn't even flinch, just kept moving, kept protecting me. Martha's expression softened slightly. That doesn't mean you have to marry him. I'm not... Lillian stopped, realizing she didn't actually know what she was doing. I just need time to think, to figure out what this means. What it means, Martha said firmly, is that you need to be very, very careful. Men like that, men with violence in their past and danger at their heels, they don't settle down and become farmers. They don't get happy endings. Maybe not, Lillian admitted. But neither do spinsters who take in laundry and die alone. The words hung in the air between them. Martha sighed, her shoulders slumping. You're going to do what you want no matter what I say, aren't you? Probably. Then at least promise me you'll keep your eyes open and your gun loaded. Lillian couldn't help but smile. When have I ever not kept my gun loaded? It was a fair point. One of the first things Lillian had done after settling in Crimson Valley was learn to shoot. She had a Colt revolver that she kept in her bedside table, and she practiced with it twice a week without fail. She'd sworn that no one would ever make her feel helpless again. They worked together in silence for a while. Martha actually making a stew now that she'd committed to the fiction, Lillian slicing bread and setting the table. Through the window, she could see Cole at the pump, stripped down to his undershirt, washing the dust of travel from his face and arms. The afternoon sun caught the water droplets on his skin, made them shine like diamonds. He looked up suddenly, as if he could feel her watching, and their eyes met through the glass. Neither of them looked away. The moment stretched, became something charged and dangerous, until Martha cleared her throat meaningfully and Lillian jerked her gaze away, her cheeks burning. "Sweet Lord," Martha muttered, "you've got it bad." "I don't have anything," Lillian protested, but even she could hear how weak it sounded. "Keep telling yourself that, honey. Maybe eventually you'll believe it." By the time Cole came inside, his shirt back on but his hair still damp, the table was set and the stew was bubbling on the stove. He'd brought his saddlebags with him, and he set them carefully by the door, next to the rifle that Lillian kept there. She noticed he didn't have a gun on his hip, and wondered if that was deliberate, a gesture of trust or safety. They sat down to eat, and the awkwardness that had plagued them outside returned with a vengeance. Martha did her best to fill the silence with cheerful chatter about town gossip, who was courting whom, which rancher had the best cattle this year, how the new school teacher from Philadelphia was scandalized by the rough conditions. Cole responded when spoken to, but volunteered little, and Lillian found herself pushing stew around her bowl more than eating it. Finally, Martha set down her spoon and fixed Cole with a direct look. "All right, enough dancing around it. What are your intentions toward Lillian?" "Martha," Lillian nearly choked on a piece of potato. "What? Someone needs to ask the hard questions, and you're clearly too busy making cow eyes at each other to get around to it." Cole's ears turned slightly red, but he held Martha's gaze steadily. "I came here to marry her. That was my intention, but circumstances have changed." "Because you're the same man from the massacre." "Yes, ma'am." "And you think the danger you're running from might follow you here." "It's possible." "But you're not certain." "No, ma'am, I'm not." Martha nodded slowly, processing this. "And if the danger does come, what then?" Cole's jaw tightened. "Then I'll deal with it. Alone. I won't let anyone else get hurt because of me." "Noble," Martha said dryly. "Stupid, but noble." She glanced at Lillian. "What do you want, honey? Not what you think you should want, not what's smart or safe. What do you actually want?" Lillian looked at Cole, really looked at him. She saw the scars, the weariness, the guilt that sat on his shoulders like a physical weight, but she also saw the strength, the determination, the fierce protectiveness that had made him throw himself between her and death without hesitation. What did she want? She wanted to stop being afraid. She wanted to stop being alone. She wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, the universe wasn't entirely cruel, and fate had brought this man back into her life for a reason. "I want him to stay," she said quietly. "At least for a while. At least until we figure out what this is." Cole's head snapped up, his expression a mixture of hope and concern. "Lillian, I'm not a fool, Cole. I know this is complicated. I know it's dangerous, but I'm tired of living half a life because I'm scared of what might happen." She reached across the table, palm up, an offering. "Stay, please." He stared at her hand like it was a lifeline and a trap all at once. Then slowly he reached out and took it. His palm was calloused, his grip firm and warm. The touch sent electricity racing up her arm. "I'll stay," he said roughly. "But only if you promise me something." "What?" "If things get dangerous, if the Garretts do come, you'll run. You won't try to fight, won't try to help. You'll just go, get as far away from me as possible." Lillian squeezed his hand. "I can't promise that." "Lillian, I can't," she repeated firmly. "You didn't run when I needed help. I won't run when you need it." They stared at each other, both stubborn, both terrified, both trying to protect the other from the darkness they could feel gathering on the horizon. Martha pushed back from the table with a sigh. "Well, this is going to end either beautifully or catastrophically, and I honestly can't tell which." She stood, began collecting dishes. "Cole, you can stay in the spare room tonight. It's not much, but the bed's clean and the roof doesn't leak. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest." "I don't want to impose—" "You already are," Martha said bluntly. "Might as well have a comfortable place to sleep while you're doing it. Lillian, help me with these dishes. Cole, you sit there and try not to look quite so much like a man facing his own execution. Despite everything, Lillian felt a smile tug at her lips. Trust Martha to cut through the drama with practical concerns. They cleaned up together, the three of them moving around the small kitchen in a dance that felt both foreign and oddly natural. Cole washed, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows, while Lillian dried and Martha put things away. They didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was companionable, almost peaceful. When Martha finally left, extracting promises from both of them to be sensible and not do anything that would give the town gossips more ammunition, Lillian walked her to the door. "Are you sure about this?" Martha asked quietly, glancing back to where Cole was banking the fire in the stove. "No," Lillian admitted. "But I'm sure I have to try." Martha hugged her tightly. "Then I'll pray you're right, and I'll keep my shotgun handy, just in case you're wrong." After she left, Lillian showed Cole to the spare room. It really wasn't much, barely big enough for the narrow bed and a small dresser, but he looked at it like it was the finest hotel suite in Denver. "Thank you," he said softly. "For this. For everything." "Don't thank me yet," Lillian said, trying for levity. "You haven't experienced one of Martha's interrogations in full force." He smiled, and it transformed his face, made him look younger, less burdened. "I think I can handle it." They stood there in the doorway, neither quite ready to say goodnight. The house was quiet around them, just the tick of the clock in the parlor and the distant sound of someone's dog barking. "Lillian," Cole said finally, "why did you really ask me to stay? Not the practical reasons. The real reason." She considered lying, or deflecting, or any of the 100 other ways she'd learned to protect herself. But something in his eyes, the vulnerability there, the desperate hope, made her choose honesty instead. "Because when you saved me 2 years ago, I felt safe for the first time in my life. And when you rode away, I felt that safety go with you." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I know it's foolish. I know you can't protect me from everything, and I shouldn't need protecting anyway. But there it is. When I saw you step off that stagecoach, even before I recognized you, I felt it again. That sense of safety, and I'm not ready to let it go." Cole's throat worked as he swallowed hard. "I'll do my best to deserve that faith. I know you will." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were gentle, reverent. "Good night, Lillian." "Good night, Cole." She forced herself to turn away, to walk to her own room at the end of the hall. She changed into her nightgown mechanically, barely aware of what she was doing. Her mind was too full of everything that had happened, everything that was happening, everything that might still happen. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of Cole settling in the spare room, the creak of the bed frame, the rustle of fabric, the thump of boots hitting the floor. Sleep should have been impossible, but exhaustion pulled her under eventually, dragging her into restless dreams of gunfire and dust and hazel eyes that promised impossible things. She woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she thought she'd dreamed everything, the stagecoach, Cole, all of it. But then she heard movement in the kitchen, the clink of a pot on the stove, and reality came rushing back. She dressed quickly, splashed water on her face, and pinned her hair up. When she emerged from her room, she found Cole in the kitchen, looking oddly domestic as he fried eggs in her cast-iron skillet. "Morning," he said, glancing up with a small smile. "Hope you don't mind. I couldn't sleep and I figured I should make myself useful." "You cook?" "Badly, but yes." He gestured to the coffee pot. "That, at least, I can manage without disaster." Lillian poured herself a cup, savoring the bitter warmth. "Where did you learn?" "Ranch work. When you're out on the range for weeks at a time, you learn to cook or you starve." He flipped the eggs with practiced ease. "These are almost done. You want one or two?" "One is fine." She sat at the table watching him work. In the morning light, he looked different, less like a dangerous gunslinger and more like just a man, slightly rumpled and stubborn bedhead, trying to make breakfast. He served the eggs with slices of bread he'd toasted over the stove, and they ate in comfortable silence. Lillian found herself studying him between bites, the way he held his fork, the small scar on his hand, the way his eyes constantly tracked to the windows, always watching. What's the plan? She asked finally. Cole set down his fork. I was thinking I'd find work. The livery might need help, or one of the ranches. I can't stay here without contributing. You could help me, Lillian heard herself say. The fence needs mending. The roof leaks in 3 places. The whole porch is one good storm away from collapsing. I can do all that, he said slowly, but people will talk. They're already talking. She shrugged. Might as well give them something worth gossiping about. He studied her for a long moment. You sure about this? Once I start working on your property, living under your roof, the whole town is going to assume we're courting, or worse. Let them assume. Lillian surprised herself with how little she cared. Unless you object? Object? He laughed, rough and low. Lillian, I came here to marry you. I'm not going to object to people thinking we're courting, even though everything's changed. Has it? He leaned forward, elbows on the table. I'm still the man who answered your advertisement. You're still the woman who wrote those letters. The only thing that's different is we both know more about each other's past. And the danger. Don't forget the danger. I'm not forgetting anything, he said quietly, but I'm also not going to live my life running from shadows. Not anymore. If Lucas Garrett wants me, let him come. At least here I'll be standing my ground for something worth protecting. The words settled over her like a blanket, warm and heavy and slightly terrifying. You barely know me. I know you're brave. I know you're stubborn. I know you'd rather face danger head-on than hide from it. His eyes held hers. I know that when bullets were flying and people were dying, you didn't scream or faint or fall apart. You stayed calm. You helped the others. And when I told you to run, you looked me dead in the eye and asked what you could do to help. Lillian felt her cheeks warm. She didn't remember much of that day with clarity. It was mostly a blur of terror and adrenaline, but she remembered that moment, the way Cole had tried to shield her with his body, the way she'd refused to cower. That doesn't mean I'm worth fighting for. Yes, it does. He said it with such certainty that she almost believed him. And even if it didn't, I'd still fight. Because that's who I am, Lillian. When I see something worth protecting, I protect it, even if it costs me everything. Before she could respond, a knock sounded at the door. They both jumped, hands instinctively moving toward weapons that weren't there. Cole recovered first, rising smoothly to his feet. I'll get it, he said. Cole, but he was already moving toward the door, his body angled to keep himself between Lillian and whatever might be on the other side. She followed, her heart pounding, wondering if this was it, if danger had found them already. Cole opened the door to reveal not an outlaw with a gun, but Samuel Hendricks, Martha's husband, looking sheepish and slightly uncomfortable. Morning, Samuel said, nodding to both of them. Sorry to bother you so early, but Martha sent me over. She wanted to make sure everyone survived the night without any dramatic incidents. Cole's shoulders relaxed fractionally. No dramatic incidents. Just breakfast. Good, good. Samuel glanced past him to Lillian. Also, there's a town meeting this afternoon. Word's gotten around about your, situation, and Mayor Hobbs wants to officially welcome Mr. Maddox to Crimson Valley. You know how he is about protocol. Lillian suppressed a groan. Mayor Hobbs loved nothing more than hearing himself talk, and official welcomes were just excuses for him to make speeches. But refusing would be seen as rude, and she couldn't afford to alienate the town any further. What time? She asked. 2 o'clock, at the church. Martha'll come by to walk over with you, if you'd like. Thank you, Samuel. Tell Martha we'll be there. After Samuel left, Cole turned to her with a raised eyebrow. Should I be worried about this meeting? Probably, Lillian admitted. But don't let it show. The mayor's harmless, mostly. He just likes to feel important. And the rest of the town? Curious? Judgmental? Same as any small town. She moved to clear the breakfast dishes. But if you can win over Martha, you can win over anyone. I'm not sure I have won her over. You're not dead yet. That's a good sign. They spent the morning working on the fence, Cole using tools from Lillian's small shed while she held boards in place. It was hot, sweaty work, but there was something satisfying about it. The simple physicality, the tangible progress. Cole worked with the easy competence of someone who'd spent years doing manual labor, and Lillian found herself watching the play of muscles under his shirt, the way sweat made his hair curl at his temples. You're staring, he said without looking up. I'm supervising. Is that what we're calling it? But he was smiling, and so was she. At 1 o'clock, they cleaned up and changed into slightly more presentable clothes. Lillian wore her Sunday dress, and Cole put on a clean shirt and his least dusty pair of trousers. Martha arrived promptly at 1:30, gave them both a critical once-over, and pronounced them acceptable. The walk to the church took 10 minutes, and every step of the way, Lillian felt eyes on them. People stopped their conversations to watch them pass. Curtains twitched in windows. By the time they reached the church, her cheeks were burning with embarrassment and defiance in equal measure. The church was already half full when they arrived. Mayor Hobbs, a portly man with impressive mutton chops and an even more impressive sense of his own importance, stood at the front, beaming. Lillian recognized most of the faces in the crowd: shopkeepers, ranchers, their wives and children, the people she'd lived among for 2 years but never quite belonged to. "Ah, Miss Hart," Mayor Hobbs called out. "And this must be Mr. Maddox. Please, come forward." Cole shot Lillian a look that clearly said, "Help me," but she just smiled sweetly and gestured for him to lead the way. They walked to the front of the church, painfully aware of every whisper, every speculative glance. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mayor Hobbs began, launching into what promised to be a lengthy speech, "we are gathered here this fine afternoon to welcome a new member to our community." Lillian let the words wash over her, focusing instead on Cole's hand resting lightly on her lower back, a gesture of support and possession that made her pulse quicken. She could feel the tension in him, the way he held himself ready for danger, even in this seemingly safe setting. The speech dragged on, full of platitudes about community values and fresh starts, and the importance of hard-working men. Lillian was contemplating the socially acceptable ways to murder someone with boredom when the church door banged open. Everyone turned. A man stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. He was tall, lean, dressed in black like a preacher or an undertaker. As he stepped forward into the light, Lillian felt Cole go absolutely rigid beside her. The stranger's face was sharp and angular, with cold blue eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. He carried no visible weapon, but something about him screamed danger more loudly than any gun could. "Sorry to interrupt," the stranger said, his voice smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "But I'm looking for someone, a man by the name of Cole Maddox. I heard he might have passed through here recently." The church had gone dead silent. Cole's hand had moved from Lillian's back to her arm, his grip tight enough to hurt. She could feel him calculating, measuring distances and exits, every muscle coiled and ready. "And who might you be?" Mayor Hobbs asked, his jovial tone faltering. The stranger's smile widened. "The name's Lucas Garrett, and Cole Maddox killed my brother." The air in the church turned to ice. Lucas Garrett stood framed in the doorway like a figure from a nightmare, his black coat stirring in the breeze that filtered through behind him. His eyes swept the congregation with predatory patience, lingering on each face before moving to the next. When his gaze finally landed on Cole, his smile sharpened into something that could cut glass. "There you are," Lucas said softly, and the gentle tone was somehow more terrifying than any shout. "I've been looking everywhere for you, Mr. Maddox." Cole's grip on Lillian's arm tightened fractionally before he released her, stepping forward to put his body between her and Lucas. The movement was subtle but unmistakable, and Lillian saw Lucas's eyes flicker with interest as he registered it. "Garrett," Cole said, his voice level despite the tension radiating from every line of his body. "Didn't expect to see you in a church. Aren't you worried about lightning?" Lucas laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "My immortal soul is the least of my concerns, I'm afraid. I'm more interested in earthly matters. Justice, for instance. Revenge. The usual motivations for men like me." Mayor Hobbs cleared his throat nervously. "Now see here, Mr. Garrett, I don't know what business you have with Mr. Maddox, but Crimson Valley is a peaceful town. We don't tolerate violence, or—" "Violence?" Lucas's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "Who said anything about violence, Mayor? I'm simply here to have a conversation with an old friend. Well, friend might be too strong a word. The man who murdered my brother, more accurately." A collective gasp rippled through the congregation. Lillian felt dozens of eyes turn toward Cole, saw the calculation in their faces as they reassessed the stranger they'd just welcomed into their community. She wanted to scream at them, to tell them they didn't know anything, but her voice was trapped somewhere in her throat. "Your brother drew on me first," Cole said flatly. "He and his gang were robbing a stagecoach, killing innocent people. I defended myself and the passengers. That's not murder, Garrett. That's justice." "Is that what you call it?" Lucas took several steps down the aisle, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. "Interesting, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you stuck your nose where it didn't belong and got my brother killed in the process. Jacob was all the family I had left in this world, Maddox. You took that from me." "Jacob took it from himself when he chose to be an outlaw." Lucas's smile never wavered, but something dark and ugly flickered behind his eyes. "You know what I find fascinating? I've been tracking you for 3 months. Denver, Colorado Springs, half a dozen little towns where you thought you could disappear. And then you vanished completely, like smoke. I was starting to think I'd lost you." He stopped in the middle of the aisle, hands loose at his sides. "But then I heard an interesting rumor. A man matching your description had sent for a mail-order bride in some nowhere town in New Mexico. Seemed like the kind of stupid, sentimental thing a man on the run might do when he thought the danger had passed." Cole said nothing, but Lillian could see the muscle jumping in his jaw. She wanted to go to him, to stand beside him, but Martha's hand on her shoulder held her in place. The older woman's grip was iron, her face pale but determined. "So I started checking," Lucas continued conversationally. "Every mail-order bride agency between here and the Canadian border. Took weeks, cost me a small fortune in bribes, but eventually I found what I was looking for. A man named CM, corresponding with a woman in Crimson Valley, New Mexico. Arrangements made for him to arrive on the 15th of June. His smile widened. "Today." The church was silent except for the sound of someone's ragged breathing. Lillian realized it was her own. "The interesting part," Lucas said, "is that I arrived yesterday. Spent the evening in your delightful saloon, listening to the locals gossip about poor Miss Lillian Hart and her mysterious mail-order husband. Seems she's had a rough time of it. Fiancé abandoned her after some unpleasantness with my brother's gang. Been alone ever since, until some cowboy answered her advertisement." He paused, savoring the moment. "Imagine my surprise when I realized it was the same stagecoach, the same woman. What are the odds, Maddox? What are the odds that you'd end up right back where it all started?" "Fate's funny that way," Cole said through gritted teeth. "Isn't it just?" Lucas's gaze shifted to Lillian, and she felt his eyes on her like a physical touch. "Miss Hart, I've heard so much about you, the survivor. The woman who watched her fellow passengers die but lived to tell the tale. Must have been terrifying." "Leave her out of this," Cole snapped, and the edge in his voice was sharp enough to draw blood. "Oh, but she is in this. Don't you see?" Lucas spread his hands in a gesture of false reasonableness. "You saved her life. Killed my brother doing it. And now, 2 years later, you're back in her life probably thinking you'll play house and live happily ever after. It's almost poetic." Mayor Hobbs found his voice again, though it shook. "Mr. Garrett, I must insist you state your business and leave. If you have a grievance with Mr. Maddox, there are legal channels." "Legal channels?" Lucas's laugh cut through the mayor's words like a knife. "You mean like the legal channels that put my brother in prison? That sentenced him to hang? That shot him down when he tried to escape from a system designed to break him?" He shook his head. "No, Mayor, I'm not interested in your legal channels. I'm interested in justice. Real justice." Samuel Hendricks stood up from his pew, his face set in hard lines. "Then you can take it up somewhere else. Not in our church, not in our town." Several other men rose as well, forming a loose line of resistance. Lillian felt a surge of gratitude for these people she'd never quite felt part of. They might gossip about her, might judge her, but they weren't going to stand by and let a stranger threaten one of their own. Lucas looked at them with something like amusement. How noble. The good people of Crimson Valley standing up for a killer. Do any of you even know who this man is? What he's done? "We know enough," Martha said firmly, and Lillian had never loved her friend more than in that moment. "Do you?" Lucas's eyes glittered. "Did he tell you about the man he shot in the back in Amarillo? Or the ranch hand he left bleeding in a ditch outside Santa Fe? My brother wasn't the first man Cole Maddox killed, and he won't be the last. Violence follows him like a shadow. Everyone he touches ends up hurt or dead. That's a lie, Lillian heard herself say. Her voice came out stronger than she felt, cutting through the tension. He saved my life. He protected innocent people from your brother's gang. If that makes him a killer, then I'm grateful for it. Every eye in the church turned to her. She felt exposed, vulnerable, but she forced herself to stand straight, to meet Lucas's gaze without flinching. She'd survived his brother's bullets. She could survive his words. Lucas studied her with new interest. Miss Hart, how brave, how loyal. Tell me, does he know what he's brought down on you? Does he understand that by being here, by standing in this church with you, he's painted a target on your back just as surely as if he'd pinned a badge to your chest? I can take care of myself. Can you? Lucas took another step forward. My brother had 5 men with him that day. Good men, loyal men. 3 of them died in that ambush. The other 2 survived, and they've been riding with me ever since. They're very interested in meeting the woman my brother died trying to rob. Curious about what made her so special that Cole Maddox would risk everything to save her. Cole moved then, fast and fluid, closing the distance between himself and Lucas until they were nearly chest to chest. If you or your men go anywhere near her, I will kill you. Not as revenge, not as justice, as a simple fact of existence. You threaten her, you die. Are we clear? For the first time, Lucas's smile faltered. Up close, with Cole looming over him, he looked less like a dangerous outlaw and more like a man playing a role he wasn't quite big enough to fill. But the flicker of uncertainty vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by cold calculation. Crystal clear, Lucas said softly. I can see she matters to you. Good. That makes this so much more satisfying. Makes what more satisfying? Lucas stepped back, creating space between them. I'm not here to kill you, Maddox. Not yet. Where's the fun in that? A bullet to the head, quick and clean? No. You took my brother from me slowly, letting him rot in a cell for months before they shot him down like a dog. I intend to return the favor. What are you talking about? I'm going to destroy you piece by piece, Lucas said pleasantly. I'm going to take everything you value, everything you care about, and I'm going to burn it to ash while you watch. And when you're broken and alone and begging for death, then, maybe then, I'll give you the mercy of a bullet. The church had gone so quiet, Lillian could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. She watched Cole's hands curl into fists, watched him struggle to control the violence that clearly wanted to break free. You're bluffing, Cole said, but there was doubt in his voice. Am I? Lucas turned toward the door, pausing at the threshold. I'll be staying at the hotel for a few days, long enough to get to know this charming little town and its charming little people. Long enough to find all your weak spots, Maddox, and believe me, I will find them. He tipped his hat to the assembled congregation, the gesture a mockery of politeness. Ladies, gentlemen, Mayor, it's been a pleasure. I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot of each other. His eyes found Lillian one last time. Especially you, Miss Hart. I have so many questions about that day. Perhaps we could have tea sometime and discuss it. Then he was gone, disappearing into the afternoon sunlight, leaving a wake of shocked silence behind him. For a long moment, no one moved. Then everyone started talking at once, voices rising in a cacophony of fear and speculation and anger. Mayor Hobbs tried to call for order, but no one was listening. Cole stood frozen in the aisle, staring at the empty doorway, like he could will Lucas back into existence just so he could hit him. Lillian pushed past Martha and went to him, putting a hand on his arm. He flinched at her touch, then seemed to come back to himself. Cole, she said quietly, look at me. He did, and the anguish in his eyes nearly broke her. I'm sorry. God, Lillian, I'm so sorry. I should have left. I should have gotten on that stagecoach the moment I realized who you were and disappeared. Now he knows about you, and he's going to... Stop. She gripped his arm harder. This isn't your fault. Isn't it? He's right. Everyone I care about ends up in danger. I'm poison, Lillian. You're the man who saved my life, she interrupted firmly. You're the man who's been running for 2 years because you protected innocent people. You're the man who came here looking for a fresh start, not knowing what you'd find. None of that makes you poison. Then what does it make me? Human, she said simply. Flawed and scared and trying your best, just like the rest of us. Before Cole could respond, Samuel Hendricks appeared at his elbow. We need to talk. All of us. Not here, not with everyone listening, but somewhere private. Cole nodded stiffly. Your place? Martha's already heading there. Come on. They left the church in a tight group. Cole, Lillian, Samuel, and a handful of other men Lillian recognized as the town's unofficial leadership. The mayor tried to follow, but Samuel shut him down with a look that could have melted steel. Martha's house was larger than Lillian's, with a proper parlor and enough chairs for everyone. Martha had coffee brewing by the time they arrived, moving with the efficient purpose of a woman who'd survived frontier life by being prepared for anything. All right, Samuel said once everyone was settled. Let's hear it, all of it. No more secrets, no more half-truths. Who is Lucas Garrett, and what exactly did you do to his brother? Cole sat with his elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. He looked like a man confessing his sins, and maybe he was. 2 years ago, I was working a ranch outside Colorado Springs. Jacob Garrett and his gang had been terrorizing that part of the territory for months. Stagecoach robberies mostly, but they weren't afraid to kill anyone who got in their way. I remember hearing about them, one of the other men said. Vicious bastards. They were, Cole agreed. I'd had a few run-ins with them before. Nothing serious, just near misses. But that day, I was riding into town when I heard gunshots. Found the stagecoach under attack, passengers screaming, driver already dead. Jacob Garrett himself was dragging a woman toward his horse. He glanced at Lillian, and she knew he was seeing that day again, reliving it. I didn't think. I just drew and fired. Got 2 of them before they even knew I was there. The rest scattered, but Jacob tried to grab the woman as a shield. I put a bullet through his gun hand, made him drop her. He ran, but I'd seen his face, knew who he was. And you reported it to the authorities, Samuel said. I did. They caught Jacob and the rest of his gang a week later, mostly because I could identify them. Jacob was sentenced to hang, but he got shot trying to escape before they could carry it out. Cole's jaw tightened. I didn't stick around to see it happen. I knew Lucas would come looking for revenge, so I ran. Been running ever since. Until you came here, Martha said. Until I came here, Cole confirmed. I thought... He stopped, shook his head. I thought it was over. Thought maybe I could finally stop looking over my shoulder and build something. I was wrong. What about the other accusations? Another man asked. The shootings in Amarillo and Santa Fe? Lies, Cole said flatly. I've never been to Amarillo in my life, and the only time I was in Santa Fe, I was passing through on my way to Denver. Lucas is trying to turn you against me. Make you think I'm as bad as his brother. Are you? The question came from an older rancher named Tom Wexley, his weathered face skeptical. Can you look me in the eye and tell me you're not a dangerous man? Cole met his gaze steadily. I am a dangerous man, Tom. I'd be lying if I said otherwise. I can shoot, I can fight, and I've killed when I had to. But I'm not a murderer, and I'm not a criminal. Everything I've done to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Like Lillian, Martha said quietly. Like Lillian, Cole agreed. And like everyone on that stagecoach. And like every person in this room, if it comes to that. Lucas Garrett wants revenge, and he's not going to care who gets caught in the crossfire. He made that clear today. So what do we do? Samuel asked. We can't just let him terrorize the town. We could arrest him, Tom suggested. Sheriff's in Santa Fe right now, but Deputy Carson can't arrest a man for making threats, Cole interrupted. Lucas knows that. He'll stay just on the right side of the law until he's ready to strike. And when he does, it'll be fast and brutal, and probably fatal. Lillian had been quiet throughout the conversation, but now she spoke up. What if he's not after you at all? Everyone turned to look at her. Cole's expression was confused. What do you mean? Think about it, she said, organizing her thoughts as she spoke. He tracked you here. He knows about our connection. He specifically mentioned me, asked about that day, said his men were interested in meeting me. What if his real target isn't you, it's me? What if he thinks the best way to hurt you is to hurt the woman you saved? The silence that followed was deafening. Cole looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. No, he said hoarsely. No, that's not. He wouldn't. Why not? Lillian pushed, even though every word felt like swallowing glass. You said it yourself. He wants to destroy you piece by piece. What better way than to undo the one good thing that came out of that day? He takes me. He doesn't just hurt you. He proves that everything you did, all the running and hiding and sacrificing, was for nothing. She's right, Samuel said grimly. That's exactly how men like Lucas Garrett think. They don't just want revenge. They want you to suffer first. Cole stood abruptly, began pacing. Then I leave. Tonight. I disappear, and Lucas follows me. Lillian stays safe. The town stays safe. Everyone wins. Except you, Lillian said. I don't matter. Yes, you do. She stood too, crossing to stand in front of him. You matter to me. You think I want to spend the rest of my life knowing you're out there somewhere, running from a man who wants you dead? You think I could live with that? Better than living with your death on my conscience. It wouldn't be on your conscience. It would be on Lucas Garrett's, where it belongs. She grabbed his hands, forced him to look at her. I'm not some delicate flower who needs protecting, Cole. I survived the massacre. I survived being abandoned. I survived 2 years alone in a town that never fully accepted me. I can survive this too. Not if he kills you. He'd have to catch me first. She tried for a smile, but it felt brittle. I'm faster than I look. No one laughed. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. We need a plan, Martha said practically. Standing around arguing about who's going to sacrifice themselves isn't helping anyone. Martha's right, Samuel agreed. Lucas said he's staying at the hotel. That means he's here, in town, where we can keep an eye on him. We organize watches, make sure he's never alone with anyone vulnerable. Lillian doesn't go anywhere without an escort. Cole stays visible, stays where Lucas can see him. We turn his strategy against him, make it impossible for him to isolate his targets. That could work, Tom said slowly. We've got enough men in town who can shoot. Set up a rotation, keep someone watching the hotel at all times. And what happens when Lucas figures out what we're doing? Cole asked. He's not stupid. He'll adapt. Let him, Samuel said. Better to force him to change his plans than let him execute the ones he's already made. Every day we delay him is another day for the sheriff to get back from Santa Fe, another day for Lucas to make a mistake. Cole looked like he wanted to argue, but Lillian squeezed his hands. It's a good plan, she said softly. Better than running. Better than facing him alone. He searched her face, looking for something. Doubt, fear, regret. Whatever he found seemed to satisfy him, because he nodded slowly. All right, we do it your way. But if things go wrong, if Lucas makes a move toward Lillian or anyone else, you'll do what needs to be done, Samuel finished. We all will. That's what community means, Cole. We protect our own. The words hung in the air, simple and profound. Lillian saw the moment they hit Cole, saw something shift in his expression. He'd been alone for so long, running and hiding and keeping everyone at arm's length. The idea that people might actually stand with him seemed to shake something loose inside him. Thank you, he said roughly. All of you. I don't deserve— Shut up, Martha said, not unkindly. You saved Lillian's life. That earns you more goodwill than you know what to do with. Now let's get organized. Samuel, you take first watch on the hotel. Tom, you're second. Cole, you stay with Lillian at her place. Don't open the door for anyone you don't know, and keep your guns loaded. They spent the next hour working out the details. Who would watch, when, where everyone would be, what signals to use if Lucas made a move. It was methodical, practical, the kind of crisis management that frontier people excelled at. By the time they finished, Lillian felt fractionally better. Not safe. She might never feel truly safe again, but prepared. When the meeting finally broke up, Cole and Lillian walked back to her house in the lengthening shadows of late afternoon. They didn't speak, both lost in their own thoughts. Lillian kept glancing at Cole's profile, trying to read his expression, but he'd retreated behind the stoic mask he wore so well. You should eat something, she said when they were inside with the door locked and bolted behind them. I'm not hungry. Cole, I can't eat, Lillian. I can barely breathe. He turned to face her, and the rawness in his expression made her chest ache. Do you understand what you've done? By standing up for me in that church, by telling Lucas you're grateful I saved you, you've made yourself a target, a deliberate, specific target. I was already a target the moment you stepped off that stagecoach. No, you weren't, not like this. Before, you were just leverage, a way to hurt me. Now you're a challenge, a statement. Lucas is going to come after you just to prove he can, just to show me that nothing I do matters. Lillian crossed the room to him, placed her hands on his chest. She could feel his heart hammering beneath her palm. Then we'll face him together. That's all we can do. I can't lose you. The words came out broken, desperate. I've lost too many people already. Everyone I've cared about has ended up hurt or dead or worse because of me. I can't. His voice cracked. I can't add you to that list. You won't, she said with more confidence than she felt. We're going to be smart. We're going to be careful. And we're going to survive this, Cole. Both of us. He pulled her against him suddenly, fiercely, burying his face in her hair. She wrapped her arms around him, holding him as tightly as he held her. They stood like that for a long time, two people clinging to each other in the gathering darkness, trying to find strength in shared warmth. I should have walked away, Cole murmured against her hair. The moment I saw you on that porch, I should have climbed back on that stagecoach and disappeared. But you didn't. No, I didn't. He pulled back just enough to look at her. Want to know why? Why? Because the first time I saved you, when I pulled you out of that stagecoach and you looked at me with those eyes, terrified and brave and so damn alive, something in me shifted. It was like I'd been sleepwalking through my whole life and suddenly woke up. And when I rode away, when I left you behind, it felt like I was leaving part of myself there with you. Lillian's breath caught. Cole, I thought about you every day, he continued. Wondered where you were, what you were doing, if you were happy. When I saw that advertisement, when I read your words about wanting a fresh start and a life with someone kind, I knew I had to answer. Even not knowing it was you, something pulled me here. And when I saw you on that porch, he cupped her face in his hands. It felt like coming home to a place I'd never been. She was crying, she realized, tears sliding down her cheeks unchecked. I thought I'd never see you again. I thought you were just a memory, something I'd made half mythical in my head. And then you were real, standing in my street, looking at me like I was the answer to a question you'd been asking your whole life. You are, he said simply. You're the answer, Lillian, the reason, the thing worth fighting for. He kissed her then, soft and gentle and absolutely terrifying in its tenderness. She kissed him back, pouring 2 years of loneliness and fear and desperate hope into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the shadows outside had deepened into full darkness. We should light a lamp, Lillian said shakily, and eat something, even if neither of us wants to. We need to keep our strength up. Cole nodded, but he didn't let go of her. Promise me something. What? Promise me that if things go wrong, if Lucas gets past all our precautions and comes for you, you'll run. Don't try to fight. Don't try to be brave. Just run as fast and as far as you can. Cole, please. His eyes were pleading. I need to know that at least you'll try to survive. She wanted to refuse, to tell him she'd never abandon him, but the desperate need in his voice stopped her. I promise, she said quietly. If there's no other choice, I'll run. It was a lie, and they both knew it. But it seemed to satisfy him, and that was enough for now. They made dinner together, moving around the small kitchen with surprising coordination, considering the circumstances. Lillian fried salt pork, while Cole cut vegetables for a simple stew. They didn't talk much, but the silence was comfortable, almost domestic. Like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. They ate at the table, the lamp casting warm light over the simple meal. Through the window, Lillian could see Samuel Hendricks settling into position across the street, a rifle across his lap. The sight should have been comforting, but instead it just reminded her how precarious their situation was. What was the ranch like? She asked suddenly, needing to fill the silence with something other than her racing thoughts. The one where you were working before all this started? Cole looked surprised by the question. The Lazy J, It was good. Hard work, but good people. Old couple named Jackson, who'd been running cattle for 30 years. They taught me everything I know about ranching. A shadow crossed his face. After the trial, after I testified against Jacob Garrett, they told me I should move on. Said they understood, but they couldn't risk having me there if Lucas came looking. I didn't blame them. That must have hurt. It did, he admitted, but they were right. A week after I left, 3 of Lucas's men showed up asking questions. The Jacksons told them I'd headed to California, sent them in completely the wrong direction. So they protected you even after asking you to leave. They did. He smiled faintly. Good people, like I said. Tell me more, Lillian said, about the places you've been, the things you've seen. So he did. As they finished dinner and cleaned up, Cole told her about Denver's bustling streets and Colorado Springs mountain views. He told her about nights sleeping under the stars and days riding through country so beautiful it hurt to look at. He told her about the small kindnesses he'd encountered. Ranchers who'd given him work without asking questions. Barkeeps who'd warned him when dangerous men came asking about him. A widow in a tiny town whose fence he'd mended in exchange for a home-cooked meal. Lillian listened, fascinated by this glimpse into his life. The man she'd built up in her imagination had been simple, a hero, a savior, almost mythical in his goodness. But the real Cole was so much more complex and interesting. He was scarred and weary and carrying guilt that wasn't his to bear, but he was also kind and observant and possessed of a dry humor that caught her off guard. Your turn, he said when he'd run out of stories. Tell me about Crimson Valley, about your life here. So she did. She told him about arriving with nothing but a small inheritance and a lot of determination, about buying the house, which had been barely habitable, and slowly making it into something resembling a home, about learning to take in laundry and mending, about the endless cycle of washing and drying and folding that kept her fed but left her hands raw. Martha was the first person who was kind to me, she said. Everyone else looked at me like I was damaged goods. The woman from the massacre. But Martha brought me a pie the day I moved in and treated me like a person instead of a tragedy. I don't know what I would have done without her. She seems like good people. The best. Lillian smiled. Her husband, too. Samuel acts all gruff, but he's got the softest heart of anyone I've ever met. Their kids adore him. They talked deep into the night, sharing the small details of their lives that somehow felt more intimate than any grand confession. Lillian learned that Cole liked his coffee strong and his eggs runny, that he could play the harmonica but not very well, that he'd once broken his wrist falling off a horse and had been too stubborn to see a doctor until it healed crooked. Cole learned that Lillian had wanted to be a teacher before circumstances derailed her plans, that she was terrified of spiders but not snakes, that she'd read every book in Crimson Valley's tiny library at least twice and was desperate for new material. It was nearly midnight when they finally ran out of words. Cole stood stretched and moved toward the spare room, but Lillian caught his hand. Stay, she said quietly. I don't mean, she felt her cheeks heat. I just don't want to be alone tonight. We could sit in the parlor or… I'll stay, he said, understanding immediately. Wherever you want. They ended up on the settee in the parlor, Lillian curled against Cole's side with his arm around her shoulders. It should have been awkward. They barely knew each other, really, but instead it felt natural. Right. Tell me about your family, Lillian said sleepily. You never mentioned them. Cole was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. My parents died when I was 12. Cholera. I've got a sister somewhere back east, but we haven't spoken in years. She wanted me to stay, work in a factory like everyone else. I wanted open sky and freedom. We said things we shouldn't have, and by the time I was ready to apologize, she'd married and moved, and I'd lost track of her. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was my choice. His arm tightened around her. What about you? Any family? An aunt in Boston. We write occasionally, but she made it clear after my engagement ended that I'd embarrass the family. I'm not exactly welcome for Christmas dinner. Then they're fools. Lillian smiled against his chest. You barely know me. I know enough. They fell silent again, and Lillian felt herself drifting toward sleep. She should get up, go to her own bed, maintain at least some sense of propriety. But Cole's warmth was too comforting, his heartbeat too steady, and she was so very tired of being strong. "Lillian?" Cole's voice was soft in the darkness. "Hmm? Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever Lucas does, I want you to know that these 2 days have been the best I've had in years, maybe ever." She tilted her head up to look at him. In the dim light filtering through the window, she could just make out his expression, soft and vulnerable and completely unguarded. "Me too," she whispered. He kissed her forehead, gentle as a benediction. "Get some sleep. We'll face whatever comes in the morning." But Lillian knew sleep wouldn't come easily. Not with danger lurking in the hotel across town, not with so many questions unanswered, not with her heart doing dangerous things every time Cole looked at her. Still, wrapped in his arms, listening to the night sounds of Crimson Valley and the steady rhythm of his breathing, she felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Hope. Hope, as it turned out, was a fragile thing. Lillian woke to the acrid smell of smoke and the sound of horses screaming. For a confused moment, she thought she was dreaming, still caught in the nightmares that had plagued her since the massacre. But then Cole was shaking her awake, his face grim in the pre-dawn darkness, and she understood with terrible clarity that this was real. "The barn," he said tersely, already moving toward the window. "It's on fire." Lillian scrambled off the settee, her heart hammering. Through the window she could see orange flames licking up the side of her small barn, illuminating the darkness like a beacon from hell. The structure was old, dry timber that would burn fast and hot. Inside were the 2 horses she kept for her wagon, and the thought of them trapped in that inferno sent ice through her veins. "The horses!" she gasped, already running for the door. Cole caught her arm. "Wait, this could be a trap. I don't care, I'm not letting them burn." She wrenched free and bolted outside, barely hearing Cole curse behind her. The heat hit her like a wall as she ran toward the barn, intense enough to make her eyes water. The horses were screaming now, a sound that would haunt her nightmares for years to come, high and terrified and utterly helpless. The barn door was stuck, swollen from the heat or deliberately barred from outside, she couldn't tell which. Lillian threw her weight against it once, twice, while behind her she heard Cole shouting something she couldn't make out over the roar of the flames. Then he was beside her, adding his strength to hers, and the door burst inward in a shower of sparks. Smoke billowed out, thick and choking. Lillian pulled her nightgown up over her mouth and nose and plunged inside before Cole could stop her. The world became heat and chaos. She could barely see through the smoke, could barely breathe, but she knew her barn. She knew where the stalls were, knew which horse would be on the left and which on the right. She stumbled forward, hands outstretched, until she felt rough wood beneath her fingers. The first horse, a bay mare named Duchess, was wild with terror, her eyes rolling white in the firelight. Lillian fumbled with the stall latch, her hands shaking so badly she could barely work the mechanism. When it finally opened, Duchess burst past her, nearly trampling her in her panic to escape. "Lillian!" Cole's voice, hoarse with smoke and fear. "Get out of here!" "One more!" she shouted back, or tried to. The smoke stole her words, turned them into coughing fits that doubled her over. But she pushed forward, found the second stall, found Duke trembling and whinnying inside. This latch was worse, warped by the heat. Lillian wrenched at it desperately, tears streaming down her face from the smoke and the fear and the sheer impossibility of the situation. Above her, she heard a crack like thunder as one of the support beams began to give way. Then Cole was there, his hands covering hers on the latch. Together they hauled it open, and Duke bolted past them toward the rectangle of open door and blessed fresh air beyond. "Now we go," Cole said, and his voice left no room for argument. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the exit, and she went, stumbling over debris she couldn't see, her lungs burning with every breath she managed to take. They burst out of the barn just as the roof collapsed behind them, sending a geyser of sparks into the pre-dawn sky. Cole pulled her away from the inferno, across the yard to where a crowd had gathered. Martha was there, and Samuel, and what looked like half the town, all roused by the fire and the commotion. "Are you insane?" Martha was shouting, her face pale and furious. "You could have died in there." Lillian couldn't answer. She was coughing too hard, her whole body shaking with the aftershocks of terror and adrenaline. Cole had his arm around her, supporting her weight, and she could feel him trembling too. "Where's Lucas?" Cole demanded, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Someone tell me where the hell Lucas Garrett is right now." "At the hotel," Tom Wexley said, appearing out of the throng. "I had the watch. I swear to God he never left his room. I was watching the whole time." "Then he had help," Cole said grimly. "This wasn't an accident." As if to prove his point, Samuel emerged from the shadows at the side of the house, holding something in his hand. Even in the flickering firelight, Lillian could see what it was. A torch, crude but effective, still smoldering. "Found it behind the barn," Samuel said. "Someone set this fire deliberately." A murmur ran through the crowd, anger and fear mixing in equal measure. Lillian watched their faces in the firelight, saw the calculation there. Some of them had been willing to stand with Cole yesterday, but a burning barn changed things, made the danger real in a way words never could. "This is just the beginning," Cole said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "He's testing us, seeing how we respond." "Well, we respond by stringing him up," someone shouted from the back of the crowd. "Man's a menace. We don't need law for this. We got rope." "No." Lillian's voice came out ragged but firm. She straightened despite the pain in her chest, despite Cole's attempt to keep her supported. "We're not becoming vigilantes. That's what Lucas wants, for us to act rashly, break the law, give him justification for whatever he's planning next." "The lady's right," Mayor Hobbs said, pushing his way to the front. For once, his pompous demeanor was absent, replaced by genuine concern. "We handle this properly. I'll ride to Santa Fe myself at first light, bring back the sheriff. Until then, we double the watch and keep everyone safe." "Safe?" Lillian almost laughed, but it came out as another coughing fit. "My barn is burning and my horses nearly died. We're past safe, Mayor." "Then what do you suggest?" She looked at Cole, saw the war raging behind his eyes. He wanted to leave. She could see it clearly. Wanted to draw Lucas away from Crimson Valley and everyone in it. But he'd promised to stay, promised to let the community help. And that promise was holding him in place by the thinnest of threads. "We end this," Lillian said. "One way or another, we end it." Martha grabbed her arm. "Lil, you're talking crazy. The smoke's gotten to you. Come inside. Let me look at you." "I'm fine." She pulled away gently. "And I'm not crazy. I'm tired. Tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of letting dangerous men dictate how I live my life." She turned to face the assembled crowd. "Lucas Garrett burned my barn to send a message. Well, I have a message for him too. He doesn't scare me, he doesn't control me, and he doesn't get to destroy what I've built here." The words rang out in the firelight, and Lillian saw heads nodding, saw spines straightening. These were frontier people, survivors by nature. They understood defiance in the face of impossible odds. "Tomorrow," she continued, "I'm going to the hotel. I'm going to look Lucas Garrett in the eye and tell him that if he wants to hurt me, he'll have to do it in broad daylight in front of witnesses. No more sneaking around in the dark. No more mysterious fires. If he's got the courage of his convictions, he can face me like a man instead of a coward." "Absolutely not," Cole said flatly. "Lillian, that's suicide." "Is it? He said himself he doesn't want me dead, not yet. He wants to use me to hurt you, which means he needs me alive and accessible. So I'm making myself accessible on my terms, not his." "It's too dangerous. Everything's dangerous." The words burst out of her, sharp with frustration. "Standing here is dangerous. Sleeping in my own bed is dangerous. Breathing is dangerous when there's a man out there who wants to hurt me. At least this way, I control the when and where." Cole looked like he wanted to argue further, but Martha cut him off. "She's right, and you know it. Waiting for Lucas to make the next move just gives him more power. We take the initiative, we force his hand. And if his hand holds a gun," Cole demanded. "Then we make sure ours do too," Samuel said. He looked at Lillian with something like respect. "I'll go with you, me and Tom and half a dozen others. We'll stand right there in the hotel lobby while you have your little chat. Lucas tries anything, he'll have to go through all of us." The plan was insane, Lillian knew that. But it was also the only plan that gave them any agency, any control over their own fates. And after 2 years of feeling helpless, she was done being a victim. "Tomorrow," she said again. Noon. The hotel. Cole opened his mouth to protest, but Lillian silenced him with a look. They could argue about it later, in private. For now, she needed to project strength, needed the town to see her as something other than the damaged woman who'd needed saving. The crowd began to disperse, some staying to help contain the fire, though there was little left to save, while others headed home with promises to spread the word and gather support. Within an hour, the barn was reduced to smoking rubble, and the sky was beginning to lighten with the approaching dawn. Lillian stood looking at the destruction, her arms wrapped around herself against the morning chill. 2 years of work, gone in less than an hour. The barn had been one of her first projects when she'd bought the property, patched together from salvaged lumber and sheer determination. Losing it felt like losing a piece of herself. Cole appeared beside her, a blanket in his hands. He draped it around her shoulders without speaking, and they stood together in silence, watching the last embers die. I meant what I said, Lillian finally whispered. I'm going to face him. I know. Cole's voice was rough with smoke and emotion. I also know I can't stop you. But Lillian, if anything happens to you because of me, then it happens because of me, she interrupted. Because of my choice, not yours, mine. She turned to look at him. You need to understand something, Cole. I'm not some prize to be won or lost. I'm not a damsel who needs rescuing. I'm a grown woman making my own decisions, and one of those decisions is to stand and fight instead of cowering and hoping the monster goes away. I know that. I do. But it doesn't make it easier to watch you walk into danger. Then don't watch. She said it more gently than she meant it. Or better yet, walk with me. Stand beside me instead of in front of me. Trust that I'm strong enough to do this. He studied her face in the growing light, and she saw the moment he truly understood what she was saying. This wasn't about heroism or bravery or any of the grand gestures that dime novels made so much of. This was about respect, about seeing her as an equal partner in this nightmare they'd stumbled into. All right, he said finally, we do it together, but we do it smart. We plan every detail, every possible contingency. And if things go sideways, we adapt, Lillian finished, together. Martha came bustling over before Cole could respond, carrying a basket that smelled of coffee and bread. You two look like death warmed over, inside, now. Food first, planning second, collapsing from exhaustion, distant third. They didn't argue. Lillian's legs were shaking with fatigue, and Cole looked like he might fall over if someone pushed him. They stumbled into the house, and Martha immediately took charge, brewing fresh coffee and toasting bread while making pointed comments about foolish people who ran into burning buildings. The horses? Lillian asked between bites of toast she couldn't taste. Safe. Tom's got them in his stable for now. Duchess has some minor burns on her legs, but the doc looked her over. Yes, the animal doctor counts as a doctor. Don't give me that look. And said she'll be fine with some care. Duke's shaken, but unharmed. Relief flooded through Lillian. The horses had been some of her first purchases when she'd settled in Crimson Valley, bought with money she could barely afford to spend. Losing them would have been devastating in more ways than one. Thank God, she murmured. Thank stupidity and blind luck, Martha corrected. You're lucky that barn didn't come down on your heads. What were you thinking? I wasn't, Lillian admitted. I just heard them screaming, and I ran. Right into a death trap. But Martha's voice had lost its sharp edge. She sat down across from them, her own cup of coffee clutched in both hands. Samuel's furious, you know. Blames himself for not watching closer, for not seeing whoever set that fire. It's not his fault, Cole said. If Lucas has men helping him, and he must because Tom swears he never left the hotel, then they could have come from any direction. No one could watch everything. That's what I told him. Didn't help much. Martha sighed. This town's on edge, Lil. People are scared. Some of them are talking about asking you to leave, taking your problems with you. The words stung, even though Lillian had been half expecting them. And the others? Angry. Ready to fight. You've got more support than you might think, especially after that speech you gave. People respect courage, even when they think it's foolish. Martha leaned forward. But are you sure about this plan? About confronting Lucas directly? No, Lillian said honestly. I'm not sure about anything anymore, but I can't just sit here waiting for the next disaster. At least this way, I'm doing something. You're gambling with your life. I've been gambling with my life since the moment that stagecoach got ambushed. At least now I'm holding the cards instead of watching someone else play them. Martha looked like she wanted to argue, but Samuel appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. We've got a problem. Another one? Cole stood, instantly alert. Lucas sent a message. One of the hotel staff brought it over. Samuel held out a folded piece of paper. It's addressed to Miss Hart. Lillian's hand shook slightly as she took it, but she forced herself to unfold it calmly. The handwriting was elegant, almost beautiful, which somehow made the words worse. My dear Miss Hart, she read aloud. I do hope you and Mr. Maddox survived your excitement this evening. Such a terrible accident, barn fires. They happen all the time on the frontier, I'm told. One must be so careful with lamps and dry timber. I look forward to our tea tomorrow. I have so many questions about that fateful day 2 years ago. Perhaps we could discuss it over refreshments at the hotel. Say, noon, I promise to be on my absolute best behavior. Cordially yours, Lucas Garrett. The silence that followed was absolute. Lillian read the note again, trying to find some hidden threat in the polite words, but Lucas's meaning was crystal clear. He knew she'd planned to confront him, probably knew every word she'd said to the crowd outside her burning barn. He was always one step ahead, always watching, and he wanted her to know it. That bastard, Martha breathed. He's toying with you. He's doing more than that, Cole said. He's controlling the narrative, making it look like he's the gracious host extending an invitation instead of Lillian taking the fight to him. If she doesn't show up now, it looks like she's the coward. And if I do show up, I'm walking into whatever trap he's set. Lillian set the note down carefully, fighting the urge to crumple it. Damned either way. So we changed the rules, Samuel said. You want to meet him at noon at the hotel? Fine. But we get there first. We control the space, we have men positioned at every exit, and we make damn sure Lucas knows that any move he makes will be his last. He'll expect that, Cole said. Of course he will. But knowing we're prepared and being able to do anything about it are two different things. We turn his advantage into a disadvantage, put him in a public space where he can't act without consequences. Lillian considered it. The hotel lobby was indeed public, with large windows facing the main street and a steady stream of guests and staff. Lucas couldn't very well shoot her in front of dozens of witnesses, not without destroying his own carefully constructed facade of civility. All right, she said. We do it, but I go in alone. Lillian? Cole started. Alone, she repeated firmly. With backup nearby, yes, but I face him by myself. Otherwise, it looks like I need protection, like I'm weak, and I can't afford that. Not with him. The argument that followed was intense, but ultimately futile. Lillian had made up her mind, and even Martha's most persuasive attempts couldn't sway her. By the time the sun had fully risen, painting Crimson Valley in shades of gold and amber, they'd worked out the details. Lillian would arrive at the hotel at noon, as invited. She'd meet Lucas in the lobby, where conversation could be overheard by anyone nearby. Samuel, Tom, and 4 other men would be positioned throughout the hotel, guests having coffee, staff going about their duties, all armed and ready. Cole would wait outside, watching through the windows, close enough to intervene, but far enough not to escalate the situation by his presence. It wasn't a perfect plan, but then nothing involving Lucas Garrett was ever going to be perfect. The morning passed in a blur of preparation. Lillian bathed, washing the smoke from her skin and hair, then dressed in her best day dress, dark blue with black trim, respectable and composed. She pinned her hair up carefully, applied a touch of rouge to combat her pallor, and studied herself in the mirror. She looked calm, collected, like a woman going to tea instead of walking into a confrontation with a dangerous outlaw. The disconnect between appearance and reality made her want to laugh hysterically, but she swallowed the impulse. Cole knocked on her door as she was fastening her mother's cameo at her throat. "Can I come in?" "Of course." He entered, then stopped, his expression unreadable as he took in her appearance. "You look beautiful." "I look terrified, and I'm hiding it well," she corrected. "That too." He crossed to her, reached out to adjust her cameo with gentle fingers. "Lillian, you don't have to do this. We can still find another way." There is no other way. You know that. She caught his hand, held it against her collarbone. Lucas wants to break us, Cole. He wants to prove that nothing we do matters, that he controls everything. If I don't face him, if I hide behind walls and armed guards, then he's already won. And if he hurts you, then you make sure he regrets it. She said it lightly, but they both knew she meant it. But he won't. Not today. Today is just a game to him, a chance to see how scared he can make me. I won't give him the satisfaction. Cole pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady thump of his heart. How had this man become so important to her so quickly? 3 days ago, she'd been alone, resigned to her solitary life. Now she couldn't imagine facing any of this without him. I love you, Cole said suddenly, the words rough and unexpected. I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other, but I need you to know that before you walk into that hotel. Whatever happens, whatever Lucas says or does, I love you. I think I've loved you since the moment I saw you in that stagecoach, blood on your dress and fire in your eyes, refusing to break even when everything around you was breaking. Lillian's eyes filled with tears. Cole, you don't have to say it back. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. But she did love him, she realized with sudden clarity. Loved him for his strength and his vulnerability, for the way he tried to protect her while respecting her autonomy, for the guilt he carried that wasn't his to bear, and the courage he showed despite it. She loved him with an intensity that terrified her, that made every risk feel exponentially more dangerous because now she had someone worth living for. I love you too, she whispered. And when this is over, when Lucas is gone and we're safe, I'm going to marry you. If you'll still have me. His arms tightened around her. If I'll still have you. Lillian, I'd marry you right now if there was a preacher handy. Let's survive today first. We can worry about weddings later. They stood like that until Martha called up the stairs that it was time to go. Lillian pulled away reluctantly, wiped her eyes, and checked her reflection one last time. The woman looking back at her was steady-eyed and determined, ready to face whatever came next. The walk to the hotel felt both endless and far too short. Lillian was aware of every eye watching from windows and doorways, aware of the men falling into position around them, Samuel ahead, Tom behind, others fanning out to cover different angles. Cole walked beside her until they reached the hotel steps, then squeezed her hand once and moved to his position by the window. Remember, he said quietly, any sign of trouble, any at all, and we come in, you're not alone. I know. She managed a smile. See you on the other side. Then she climbed the steps, pushed open the hotel door, and walked into Lucas Garrett's trap. The lobby was busy for a Sunday noon, filled with guests reading newspapers and hotel staff bustling about their duties. Lillian recognized several of the faces, Samuel's nephew working as a bellhop, Tom's daughter serving coffee, the blacksmith's wife pretending to wait for someone in the corner. Her people, armed and ready. Lucas sat in a high-backed chair near the window, a cup of tea on the small table beside him. He rose when he saw her, his movements graceful and unhurried, and smiled like they were old friends reuniting. Miss Hart, he said warmly, how kind of you to accept my invitation. Please sit. I've ordered tea and those delightful little cakes the hotel makes. Lillian sat in the chair across from him, arranging her skirts with hands that barely shook. Mr. Garrett, I trust you slept well? Like a baby, thank you. Though I was distressed to hear about the fire at your property. Such a shame. I do hope no one was hurt? The horses are fine. The barn is a total loss, but barns can be rebuilt. Indeed they can, with time and money and effort. His smile never wavered. I imagine it's quite overwhelming, facing such destruction. Makes one wonder if perhaps a quieter life elsewhere might be preferable. So that was his play. Not direct threats, but subtle pressure, making her feel unsafe until she chose to leave on her own. Lillian felt a flash of anger cut through her fear. I'm quite happy in Crimson Valley, she said coolly. I have no intention of leaving. No? How unfortunate. Lucas poured tea for both of them with exaggerated care. You see, Miss Hart, that presents something of a problem for me. I came here for Mr. Maddox, and I can't very well complete my business while he's playing house with you. It's all very inconvenient. Then perhaps you should leave. Find another target for your revenge. Cole didn't kill your brother. The law did. The law he helped put Jacob in front of. Lucas's smile finally slipped, revealing the anger beneath. Don't mistake me for a fool, Miss Hart. I know exactly what happened that day. Cole Maddox inserted himself into a situation that was none of his concern, testified against my brother, and watched him die in prison. That makes him responsible, law or no law. Your brother was robbing a stagecoach and killing passengers, Lillian said sharply. Cole saved lives, including mine. If you want to blame someone for Jacob's death, blame the man who chose a life of crime. Lucas's eyes went flat and cold. Careful, Miss Hart. You're testing my patience. Good. The word came out before she could stop it. Because you're testing mine. You burned my barn, threatened my town, and disrupted my life. All because you can't accept that your brother's actions had consequences. That's not justice, Mr. Garrett. That's a child's tantrum dressed up in adult clothes. For a long moment, Lucas just stared at her. Then to her surprise, he laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. You've got spirit, I'll give you that. I can see why Maddox is so taken with you. Most women would be crying by now. I'm not most women. No, you're certainly not. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with new interest. Tell me about that day, the massacre. What do you remember? The change of subject threw her, but Lillian forced herself to answer. Why do you want to know? Curiosity. My brother died because of what happened on that stagecoach. I'd like to understand what was worth his life. It was a trap, Lillian knew. Everything with Lucas was a trap, but she also sensed an opportunity, a chance to make him see the victims of his brother's crimes as real people instead of abstract concepts. I remember the sound, she said quietly, gunfire echoing off the canyon walls, so loud I thought my eardrums would burst. I remember the driver falling from his seat, dead before he hit the ground. I remember the woman sitting across from me, Mrs. Patterson her name was, screaming for her husband who was already dying in the dust. Lucas's expression didn't change, but she saw his hands tighten on the arms of his chair. I remember Jacob's face, she continued, the way he smiled while he dragged Mrs. Patterson out of the coach by her hair. She was 63 years old, Mr. Garrett, a grandmother, and your brother shot her in the chest because she wouldn't stop crying. That's enough, Lucas said tightly. Is it? Because I'm just getting started. Lillian leaned forward. I remember the young couple who were headed to California to start a farm. Jacob killed them both because they didn't have enough money to satisfy him. I remember the merchant who begged for his life, offering everything he had and getting a bullet for his trouble. I remember blood and terror and the absolute certainty that I was going to die. I said that's enough. And then I remember Cole. Her voice softened, appearing out of nowhere like an avenging angel. I remember him putting himself between me and your brother's gun. I remember him taking a bullet in the shoulder and not even flinching. I remember him carrying me to safety and telling me everything would be all right, and somehow, impossibly, believing him. Lucas's face had gone pale beneath his tan. You're trying to make me feel guilty. I'm trying to make you see the truth. Your brother was a monster, Mr. Garrett. Whatever he was to you personally, whatever good qualities he might have had, he was also a man who killed innocent people for profit. Cole didn't murder him. Cole stopped him from murdering others. There's a difference. Not to me, Lucas said, but there was less conviction in his voice. Then you're as much a monster as Jacob was. Lillian stood, done with the pretense of civilized conversation. I'm not leaving Crimson Valley. Cole isn't leaving. If you want revenge, you'll have to take it with the whole town watching. And then you'll hang, just like your brother should have. The only question is whether you're smart enough to walk away before that happens. She turned to leave, but Lucas's next word stopped her cold. He's going to get you killed, you know. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. Everyone Cole Maddox cares about ends up dead or destroyed. It's his gift. Lillian looked back at him. Then I'd rather die standing beside him than live safely without him. At least my death would mean something. What will yours mean, Mr. Garrett? What legacy are you leaving besides more grief and more violence? She didn't wait for an answer. She walked out of the hotel with her head high and her hands steady, past Samuel, who fell into step beside her, past Cole, who met her on the street with questions in his eyes. Later, she told them both. Right now, I just want to go home. But as they walked away from the hotel, Lillian felt Lucas's eyes on her back, and she knew with terrible certainty that this wasn't over. If anything, it had just begun. The confrontation had bought them time. But time for what? Lucas wasn't going to give up, wasn't going to be shamed into leaving. He'd just adapt his strategy, find new ways to hurt them, and eventually, the sound of breaking glass shattered her thoughts. Lillian turned to see the window of her house explode outward, flames already licking at the curtains. Not again. God, not again. Everyone back! Cole was shouting, pulling her away from the building even as men rushed forward with buckets. But Lillian could see it was hopeless. The fire had started inside this time, probably with multiple accelerants, and it was spreading fast. Her home, her sanctuary, everything she'd built over 2 years going up in smoke while Lucas Garrett watched from his hotel window. This was war, and Lillian was done playing defense. The bucket brigade formed with practiced efficiency, but Lillian knew it was futile even before the first splash of water hit the flames. The fire had too much of a head start, was burning too hot and too fast. Within minutes, the front room was engulfed, black smoke pouring from every window and crack. My things, Lillian heard herself say, the words distant and hollow. Everything I own is in there. Cole's arm tightened around her waist. Things can be replaced. You can't. But could they? Could she replace the letters from her mother, the only photograph she had of her parents, the wedding ring her grandmother had given her on her deathbed? Could she replace 2 years of memories, of building a life from nothing, of proving to herself that she could survive? He did this, she said, her voice shaking with rage instead of tears. While I was sitting there talking to him, his men were here burning my house. He looked me in the eye and smiled and pretended to be civilized while destroying everything I have. I know. Cole's voice was rough with his own fury. And he's going to pay for it. How? Lillian turned to face him, aware that she was probably causing a scene, but beyond caring. How is he going to pay, Cole? He's too smart to get caught, too careful to leave evidence. He'll keep doing this, keep destroying piece after piece of our lives, until there's nothing left but ash and grief. Then we give him what he wants, Cole said quietly. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Lillian stared at him, trying to understand what he was suggesting, and felt her stomach drop when she realized. No, she said flatly. Absolutely not. It's the only way to end this. Lucas wants me, not you, not the town. I leave, draw him away from here, and get yourself killed in the process. That's your plan? Noble sacrifice? She laughed, bitter and sharp. I already told you I'm not interested in living safely without you. Did you think I was joking? Lillian, look around. Cole gestured at the burning house, at the crowd of people watching with varying degrees of sympathy and fear and poorly concealed resentment. This is what staying here means. More fires, more destruction, more danger for everyone. I can't. His voice cracked. I can't watch him destroy you. I'd rather die than see that. Then it's a good thing you don't get to make that choice alone. Lillian grabbed his face in both hands, forced him to meet her eyes. We're in this together, remember? You promised me that. No running, no sacrificing yourself, no heroic gestures that leave me behind to pick up the pieces. What else can I do? The anguish in his voice was raw and devastating. Tell me what to do, Lillian, because I'm out of ideas. She wanted to have an answer, wanted to be strong and certain and full of solutions. But all she had was rage and grief and the smoking ruins of everything she'd built. So she did the only thing she could. She held onto Cole and watched her house burn and tried to figure out how to fight a man who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. The fire burned for hours. By the time it finally died down to smoldering embers, the sun was setting, and Lillian's house was nothing but a blackened skeleton. The walls still stood, barely, but everything inside was destroyed. The furniture she'd saved for, the curtains she'd sewn by hand, the small treasures she'd accumulated, all gone. Martha appeared at her elbow with a shawl and a cup of something that smelled like whiskey. Come on, honey, you're staying with us tonight, both of you. I should search the ruins, Lillian said numbly. Maybe something survived. Not tonight. It's too hot, too dangerous. Tomorrow, in daylight, we'll sift through everything. But tonight, you need rest and food and a safe place to sleep. Martha's voice was firm, brooking no argument. Don't make me drag you. Lillian let herself be led away, Cole trailing behind them like a ghost. The Hendricks house felt too warm, too bright, too alive compared to the devastation they'd just left behind. Martha installed them in the parlor with blankets and pillows, brought them soup that Lillian couldn't taste, and finally left them alone with strict instructions to sleep. Sleep seemed impossible, but exhaustion had other ideas. Lillian found herself drifting despite the turmoil in her mind, curled against Cole on the settee just like the night before. Had it really only been one night since they'd sat like this, finding comfort in each other's presence? Felt like years. She woke to voices in the kitchen, Martha and Samuel speaking in low, urgent tones. Lillian lay still, not quite ready to face the day, and found herself eavesdropping. Can't keep going like this, Samuel was saying. The town's ready to tear itself apart. Half the people want to run Lucas out on a rail, the other half want to hand over Cole and be done with it. And what do you want? Martha's voice was sharp. I want my family safe. I want to sleep at night without wondering if our house is going to be the next one to burn. I want... Samuel sighed. I want to do the right thing, Martha. I just don't know what that is anymore. The right thing is standing by our friends. Cole saved Lillian's life. That means something. It meant something before people started losing their property, before the whole town was living in fear. I'm not saying Cole's a bad man, but maybe he should go, just until this blows over. It won't blow over. Martha's voice was flat with certainty. Men like Lucas Garrett don't blow over. They escalate. If Cole leaves now, Lucas will just find another way to hurt him, and that way might involve hurting us to send a message. At least with Cole here, we can prepare, can fight back. Fight back how? We're shopkeepers and ranchers, not gunfighters. We can't take on an outlaw and his gang. Then we get help. Send for the marshal in Albuquerque, wire the territorial governor, do something other than cowering and hoping Lucas leaves us alone. Lillian felt Cole shift beside her, knew he was awake and listening too. She turned her head to look at him and found him staring at the ceiling, his jaw tight with tension. They're afraid, she whispered. They should be. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid. He sat up carefully, running his hands through his hair. Samuel's right. I should go. No. Lillian. I said no. She sat up too, facing him in the gray pre-dawn light. You leave. I leave with you. And before you argue, think about what that means. Lucas knows I matter to you. If we run together, we're still targets, just isolated ones without any support or backup. At least here we have people who care, people who'll help, people who are terrified and ready to turn on us. Some of them, Lillian conceded, but not all. Martha and Samuel are still with us. Tom Wexley, the mayor despite his bluster, dozens of others. We're not alone, Cole. Not yet. He looked like he wanted to argue, but footsteps in the hall cut off whatever he'd been about to say. Martha appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day, her expression carefully neutral. You're awake? Good. There's coffee and breakfast in the kitchen. You should eat before... She hesitated. Before the town meeting. Lillian's stomach sank. What town meeting? Mayor called it for this morning, 8 o'clock at the church. Everyone's expected to attend. Martha's face was sympathetic but resigned. They're going to vote on what to do about the situation. About us, you mean, Cole said flatly. About the best way to protect the town. Which might mean asking you to leave, yes. But it also might mean organizing a proper defense, or sending for help, or any number of other options. Martha sat down across from them. You need to be there. You need to make them understand that running won't solve anything. Will they listen? Lillian asked. Some will, others won't, but you have to try. They ate breakfast in tense silence, both too nervous to do more than pick at their food. Lillian borrowed a dress from Martha, slightly too large but serviceable, and tried to make herself presentable despite having no hairbrush or personal items. The woman in Martha's mirror looked haggard and hollow-eyed, nothing like the composed figure who'd confronted Lucas yesterday. Had that really been less than 24 hours ago? Time had become elastic, stretching and compressing in ways that made her head spin. The walk to the church felt like a death march. People were already gathering, their faces a mixture of curiosity, sympathy, and barely concealed hostility. Lillian held her head high and kept her hand on Cole's arm, projecting a confidence she didn't remotely feel. Inside, the church was packed, every pew filled and people standing along the walls. Mayor Hobbs stood at the front, looking uncomfortable in his role as mediator. Lucas Garrett sat in the back row, his presence a provocation and a reminder that he was always watching, always waiting. "Order, please," Mayor Hobbs called, rapping his knuckles on the pulpit. "We're here to discuss the recent events and determine the best course of action for Crimson Valley. I think we all agree that the situation has become untenable." "That's putting it mildly," someone shouted from the middle rows. "We've had 2 fires in 2 days. Who's next? Which of us is going to wake up to flames because we were friendly to the wrong people?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Lillian felt Cole tense beside her, felt him preparing to stand and accept responsibility, and grabbed his hand to stop him. "Let me," she whispered. Then, louder, addressing the crowd, "You're right. The situation is untenable, and I'm sorry, more sorry than I can express, for bringing this danger to your doorstep." The church fell silent. Lillian stood, aware of every eye on her, and forced herself to continue. "I didn't plan for any of this. I answered an advertisement for a mail-order husband looking for a fresh start, never knowing that the man who'd answer would be the same one who saved my life 2 years ago, never knowing that his presence would bring an outlaw to our town bent on revenge." "Then send him away," a woman's voice called out. "Send him away and maybe this Lucas person will leave us alone." "He won't." Lillian turned to face the speaker. "I know you want to believe that removing Cole will solve everything, but it won't. Lucas Garrett isn't here just for revenge. He's here to prove a point, to demonstrate his power. Even if Cole left today, Lucas would stay. He'd keep terrorizing us until we gave him something else he wanted, or until someone stood up to him and made him leave. There is no easy solution." "So what do you suggest?" Mayor Hobbs asked. "We can't fight an outlaw gang." "Maybe we can't win a straight fight," Samuel Hendricks said, standing. "But we can make it too costly for them to stay. We've already started organizing watches and patrols. We can do more. Set up a proper defense, coordinate with other towns, send for the territorial marshal." "That could take weeks," Tom Wexley added, "and cost money we don't have, not to mention the risk while we're waiting." "The risk exists either way," Martha pointed out. "At least this way we're taking action instead of just hoping things get better on their own." The debate raged back and forth, voices rising as fear and frustration boiled over. Lillian listened to her neighbors argue about her fate, about Cole's presence, about the cost of doing the right thing versus the cost of taking the easy way out. It was exhausting and humiliating and deeply human all at once. Then Lucas stood, and the church fell silent. "If I may," he said, his voice carrying easily across the space, "I couldn't help but notice that I'm the subject of much discussion, yet no one has asked me what I want." "We know what you want," Cole said sharply. "You want me dead." "Eventually, yes. But I'm a reasonable man. I'm willing to negotiate." Lucas smiled that cold, calculating smile. "Here's my offer. Cole Maddox faces me in a fair fight. Just him and me, guns at dawn, witnessed by the whole town. He wins, I leave Crimson Valley and never return. I win. Well," he shrugged, "problem solved either way." "No," Lillian said immediately. "Absolutely not. It's not your choice, Miss Hart, it's Cole's." Lucas's eyes glittered with amusement. "What do you say, Maddox? Man enough to face me without hiding behind your woman's skirts?" The provocation was obvious, deliberate, designed to goad Cole into accepting. Lillian felt him shifting beside her, felt the anger radiating off him in waves, and knew with terrible certainty that he was going to say yes. "Don't," she whispered urgently. "It's a trap. He'll cheat, or have his men waiting to shoot you, or—" "I accept," Cole said, his voice ringing out clear and strong. The church erupted, people shouting over each other, some approving, others protesting, everyone having an opinion. Lillian felt the world tilting sideways, felt her carefully maintained composure shattering into pieces. "You idiot!" she hissed at Cole. "You absolute idiot! This is exactly what he wants." "It's the only way to end it," Cole said. and the resignation in his voice broke her heart. Lucas won't stop until one of us is dead. Better to face him on terms I can control than wait for him to burn down the whole town around us. Terms you can control? He just dictated every single term, Lillian wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him see reason. Dawn? That gives him all night to set up whatever trap he's planning. Guns? He's probably faster than you. Witnessed by the town? That means his men will be here too, ready to finish the job if somehow you manage to win. Then what would you have me do? Cole grabbed her shoulders, his face inches from hers. Tell me, Lillian, give me another option that doesn't involve more innocent people getting hurt. She couldn't. That was the terrible truth of it. Every option she could think of involved either Cole running, which would just prolong the inevitable, or the town banding together to fight, which could result in dozens of casualties. At least this way, the violence would be contained to two people who'd chosen it. Except she hadn't chosen it. She'd been given no choice at all. Fine, she said, her voice cold with fury. But I have conditions too. Lucas raised an eyebrow. You're not part of this negotiation, Miss Hart. The hell I'm not. You want your duel? Fine. But it happens in the middle of Main Street, with clear lines of sight in all directions. No buildings for your men to hide in, no cover for ambush, and you and Cole both get searched before the fight to make sure neither of you has any hidden weapons. Lillian, Cole started. Those are my terms, she said, not looking at him. Take them or leave them, Mr. Garrett. Otherwise, Cole doesn't show up, and you'll have to shoot him in the back like the coward you are. I'm sure the town will be very impressed. For a long moment, Lucas studied her. Then he smiled, genuine amusement lighting his face. You know what, Miss Hart? I like you. You've got steel in your spine. It's almost a shame you've attached yourself to a dead man. He inclined his head slightly. Your terms are acceptable. Dawn tomorrow, Main Street, witnesses all around. May the best man win. He walked out of the church, several men following him, his gang, Lillian realized, hidden among the townspeople all along. The revelation sent ice through her veins. How many of them were there? How deeply had Lucas infiltrated Crimson Valley while they'd been focused on watching him at the hotel? The town meeting dissolved into chaos after that. Mayor Hobbs tried to maintain order, but it was hopeless. People were talking over each other, making plans, placing bets, treating the upcoming duel like entertainment instead of the tragedy it was. Lillian couldn't stand it anymore. She pushed her way out of the church and into the morning sunlight, her hands shaking with rage and fear. Cole followed her, along with Martha and Samuel and a handful of others. That was stupid, Martha said bluntly. Brave, but stupid. I know, Cole replied. But it's done now. It's not done, Lillian said sharply. You still have a day to prepare, to practice, to plan, to... She stopped, realizing how futile it all sounded. To give yourself a fighting chance. I've been in gunfights before. I know what I'm doing. Against outlaws attacking stagecoaches, not against someone who's had weeks to prepare and probably cheats. She turned to face him fully. When was the last time you actually practiced drawing? Not in a fight, not under pressure, but actually took the time to work on your speed and accuracy? Cole's silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. Lillian looked at Samuel. You have guns, don't you? Space where Cole can practice? I've got both, Samuel confirmed. And I'm a fair shot myself. I can help him train, give him some pointers. Good. We've got today and tonight. Let's use them. They spent the rest of the morning and well into the afternoon at Samuel's property, which was far enough from town to muffle the sound of gunshots. Cole practiced drawing and firing until his hands were sure and steady, until the motion became as natural as breathing. Samuel offered advice, correcting his stance and grip, pushing him to be faster without sacrificing accuracy. Lillian watched it all with a sick feeling in her stomach. She'd pushed for this, insisted on conditions that gave Cole a fair chance, but now that the moment was approaching, she wanted nothing more than to grab him and run, consequences be damned. But she couldn't. They were committed now, for better or worse. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Samuel's yard, Cole finally stopped practicing. His gun hand was steady, his draws quick and clean, but exhaustion was written in every line of his body. That's enough, Samuel said. Any more and you'll be too tired to shoot straight tomorrow. Come on, let's get you fed and rested. They walked back to town in the fading light, none of them speaking. The weight of what was coming hung over them like a storm cloud, dark and oppressive. Lillian kept sneaking glances at Cole, memorizing the details of his face, the scar through his eyebrow, the line of his jaw, the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he almost smiled. Tomorrow, he might be dead. The thought kept circling through her mind like a vulture, persistent and awful. She'd survived the massacre, survived abandonment, survived building a life from nothing, but she didn't think she could survive losing Cole. Martha had dinner waiting when they returned, a proper meal with roast chicken and vegetables and fresh bread. Lillian forced herself to eat, knowing she'd need her strength for whatever came next, but everything tasted like ash. After dinner, Martha tactfully suggested that she and Samuel needed to check on something at the general store, leaving Cole and Lillian alone in the parlor. The house felt too quiet, the silence broken only by the ticking of the clock and the distant sounds of the town preparing for tomorrow's spectacle. "You should sleep," Lillian said, not looking at him. "You need to be rested. So should you." "I won't be able to, not tonight." She finally met his eyes. "I'm too angry." "At me? At you? At Lucas? At the whole damn situation?" She stood, began pacing. "You know what the worst part is? I can't even tell you not to do this because I know you're right. This is the only way to end it without the whole town paying the price. But that doesn't make it easier to accept." Cole crossed to her, stopping her restless movement with gentle hands on her shoulders. "I'm going to win, Lillian." "You can't promise that." "Yes, I can. Because I have something to fight for now." He cupped her face in his hands. "I spent 2 years running, just trying to survive. But now I have you, and a future I actually want to live for. That makes me dangerous in ways Lucas can't anticipate." "Or it makes you vulnerable," Lillian whispered. "Fear of losing something can make you hesitate at the wrong moment." "Then I'll have to make sure I don't hesitate." He kissed her softly, gently, like she was something precious that might break. "I love you. Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to remember that." "Don't." Tears were streaming down her face now. "Don't say goodbye. We're not there yet." "I'm not saying goodbye. I'm saying I love you, and I'm going to win. And then we're going to get married and build a new house and live the life we should have had all along." He smiled, and it almost reached his eyes. "That's not goodbye, Lillian. That's a promise." She wanted to believe him, wanted to have faith that tomorrow would end with Cole alive and Lucas defeated and their future stretching out bright and hopeful before them. But faith felt like a luxury she couldn't afford, not when she'd seen too many good people die for no reason at all. So instead of arguing, instead of trying to find the right words, she kissed him, poured everything she felt, love and fear and desperate hope, into that kiss, trying to memorize the taste of him, the feel of his arms around her, the way he held her like she was the most important thing in his world. They stayed like that for a long time, holding on to each other as the night deepened around them. Somewhere in town, Lucas Garrett was probably sleeping soundly, confident in his victory. But here, in the borrowed parlor of the Hendricks house, 2 people clung to each other and tried to find courage for what was coming. Eventually, Martha and Samuel returned, and the spell was broken. They went through the motions of preparing for bed, though no one expected to sleep. Cole lay on the settee while Lillian curled up in Martha's spare room, both of them staring at their respective ceilings and counting down the hours until dawn. Lillian must have dozed eventually because she woke to Martha shaking her shoulder gently. "It's time, honey. Sun's about to come up." She dressed in borrowed clothes again, Martha's second-best dress, dark and practical. Her hands shook as she pinned her hair, as she splashed water on her face, as she tried to prepare herself for what was coming. Through the window, she could see people already gathering on Main Street, claiming the best viewing positions like they were attending a play instead of a potential execution. Cole was waiting in the kitchen, already dressed, his gun belt strapped low on his hips. He looked calm, composed, every inch the gunfighter he'd never wanted to be. But Lillian could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand kept drifting toward his gun, as if to reassure himself it was still there. "Ready?" she asked quietly. "As I'll ever be." They walked to Main Street together, flanked by Samuel and Martha and Tom Wexley and a dozen others who'd become unlikely allies over the past few days. The crowd parted to let them through, and Lillian felt the weight of all those eyes, all that judgment and speculation and morbid curiosity. Lucas was already there, standing in the middle of the street with the rising sun at his back, a deliberate choice that would put Cole at a disadvantage, looking into the light. His men were scattered throughout the crowd, their positions obvious to anyone who knew what to look for. Lillian counted at least 5, possibly more. "Mr. Maddox," Lucas called out pleasantly, "so good of you to join us. I was worried you might have run away in the night." "I keep my promises," Cole said flatly. "Unlike some people." "Oh, I keep my promises too. I promise to destroy you, and I always follow through." Lucas spread his arms. "Shall we get started? I'm eager to finish this business and move on." Mayor Hobbs stepped forward nervously, his role as unofficial referee clearly weighing on him. "Gentlemen, before we proceed, I need to ask if there's any possibility of resolving this peacefully. Any chance of—" "No," Lucas and Cole said simultaneously. The mayor sighed. "Very well, then let's at least make sure we follow Miss Hart's conditions. Everyone, please clear the street. Give these men room to do what they've agreed to do." The crowd shuffled back, creating a wide circle around the two combatants. Lillian wanted to rush forward, to grab Cole and drag him away from this madness, but Martha's hand on her arm stopped her. "You have to let him do this," Martha whispered. "It's the only way." Samuel and Tom stepped forward to search both men for hidden weapons, a humiliating but necessary precaution. They found nothing on Cole but pulled a small derringer from Lucas's boot, exactly the kind of cheating Lillian had expected. "Just insurance," Lucas said with a shrug, not even bothering to look embarrassed. "Can't be too careful." "You'll be careful or you'll be disqualified," Mayor Hobbs said with surprising firmness. "This is supposed to be a fair fight." "Of course, my apologies." But Lucas's smirk suggested he wasn't sorry at all. The two men took their positions 20 paces apart, hands hovering near their guns. The crowd fell silent, barely breathing. Lillian's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "The rules are simple," Mayor Hobbs announced, his voice shaking. "I'll count to 3. On 3 you may draw. First man to fire a killing shot wins. Any questions?" There were none. Cole and Lucas stared at each other across the dusty street, and Lillian saw recognition pass between them. Two men who understood violence, who'd chosen this path even knowing where it led. "1," Mayor Hobbs said. Lillian's hands clenched into fists. This was insane. This was barbaric. This was 2. The only way to end the cycle of revenge and fear and destruction. The only way for any of them to move forward. 3! The world exploded into motion. Both men drew. The sound of metal clearing leather was sharp in the morning air, followed immediately by 2 gunshots that rang out as one. For a heartbeat, neither man moved. Then Lucas Garrett's gun fell from his hand and he dropped to his knees, clutching his chest. Cole stood frozen, gun still raised, smoke curling from the barrel. A bright line of red appeared on his left arm where Lucas's bullet had grazed him, but he was alive. Standing. Breathing. Lucas looked down at the blood spreading across his shirt, then up at Cole with an expression of pure disbelief. "You actually did it," he said, his voice already weakening. "You actually beat me." "I had more to lose," Cole replied quietly. Lucas laughed, a wet, bubbling sound. "That's where you're wrong, Maddox. I had everything to lose. My brother was all I had left." He swayed, struggling to stay upright. "And you took him from me." "Your brother took himself from you the day he chose to be an outlaw." But Cole lowered his gun, but didn't holster it, watching for any sign of treachery even now. "I'm sorry for your loss, Lucas, truly, but this had to end." "Yeah." Lucas's eyes were already glazing over. "Yeah, I suppose it did." He fell forward into the dust and didn't move again. For a moment, the street was silent. Then chaos erupted as people rushed forward, some to check on Lucas, others to congratulate Cole, still others to simply bear witness to what had happened. Lillian fought her way through the crowd, her heart hammering, tears streaming down her face, though she couldn't say if they were from relief or grief or sheer overwhelming emotion. She reached Cole just as he holstered his gun with shaking hands. "You're alive," she gasped, throwing her arms around him. "Thank God you're alive." He held her tightly, his face buried in her hair. She could feel him trembling, could feel the adrenaline and fear and relief pouring out of him in waves. "It's over," he murmured. "It's finally over." But even as he said it, Lillian saw movement in the crowd. One of Lucas's men, the one she'd noticed earlier with his hand near his gun, was pushing through the gathering with murder in his eyes. She saw the glint of metal as he drew, saw him raising his pistol toward Cole's unprotected back. "Gun!" she screamed, but the warning came too late. The shot rang out and Lillian braced for impact, for the sight of Cole falling, for her worst nightmare coming true. Instead, the outlaw collapsed, a red stain spreading across his shoulder. Samuel Hendricks stood 20 feet away, rifle still raised, his face grim. "Anyone else want to try?" Samuel called out, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent street. "Because I've got enough bullets for all of Lucas's men, and I'm not in a forgiving mood." Tom Wexley stepped forward, his own rifle at the ready. "Same here. You boys want to avenge your boss, go ahead and try. But you'll be joining him before you take another step." The remaining outlaws looked at each other, looked at their fallen leader and wounded companion, and seemed to come to a collective decision. One by one, they raised their hands in surrender. "Smart choice," Mayor Hobbs said, finding his courage now that the immediate danger had passed. "Deputy Carson, take these men into custody. We'll hold them until the marshal arrives from Albuquerque." The crowd began to disperse as the outlaws were rounded up, people heading home to process what they'd witnessed. Lillian held on to Cole like he might disappear if she let go, barely aware of the congratulations and relief expressed by those passing by. "You saved my life," Cole said quietly, pulling back just enough to look at her. "Your warning gave Samuel the time he needed." "You saved mine first," Lillian replied. "I think we're even now." He laughed, the sound exhausted but genuine. "I don't think it works that way, but I'll take it." Martha appeared with bandages and a determined expression. "Let me see that arm. And don't tell me you're fine. I can see the blood from here." The bullet had only grazed Cole's bicep, cutting a shallow furrow through the muscle, but missing anything vital. Martha cleaned and dressed it with efficient movements while lecturing him about the stupidity of dueling and the foolishness of men in general. Cole took the scolding with good grace, too relieved to be alive to argue. "What happens now?" Lillian asked when Martha had finished. "Lucas is dead, his men are arrested, but everything's still gone. My house, my barn, and everything I worked for." "We rebuild," Martha said firmly. "That's what we do out here. We rebuild and we move forward." She looked between Lillian and Cole. "And you two finally get to have that wedding you've been postponing." The words hung in the air, full of possibility and hope. Lillian looked at Cole, saw the question in his eyes, and felt something loosen in her chest. The fear that had been her constant companion for days finally began to fade, replaced by something warmer and more sustaining. "Is that a proposal?" she asked with a slight smile. "I already proposed," Cole reminded her. "You accepted. We just got a little sidetracked with fires and duels and attempted murder." "Fair point." Lillian took his hand, feeling the calluses and scars, the solid reality of him alive and here, and hers. "Then, yes, let's get married, as soon as possible, before anything else can go wrong." "Tomorrow?" Cole suggested. "Tomorrow might be pushing it. We need a preacher, witnesses, and I'd like to at least have a dress that actually fits." She glanced down at Martha's borrowed clothes. "Give me a week, 1 week to get organized, and then we make this official. A week I can manage." He lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. "Though I'd marry you right now in borrowed clothes and blood-stained shirt if you'd let me." "Romantic," Martha said dryly, "but impractical. Come on, both of you. Let's get back to the house. You need rest, food, and probably a stiff drink. We can plan weddings later." The walk back to the Hendricks house felt different from the walk to Main Street that morning. The weight of impending violence had lifted, replaced by exhaustion and relief and the strange lightness that came from surviving something terrible. People called out congratulations as they passed, offered help with rebuilding, expressed gratitude that the threat was finally over. Lillian realized with some surprise that the town had fully accepted them now. The trial by fire, literal and metaphorical, had transformed them from outsiders to community members. It wasn't the path she would have chosen, but she couldn't deny the results. Over the next few days, Crimson Valley began to heal. The marshal arrived from Albuquerque to transport Lucas's men to trial. The territorial governor sent a letter commending the town's handling of the situation and promising aid for those who'd lost property. And true to their word, the townspeople rallied to help Lillian rebuild. Samuel organized work crews to clear the rubble from her property. Tom donated lumber from his mill at cost. Martha collected donations of furniture and household goods from families who had extra to spare. Even Mayor Hobbs contributed, using his connections to expedite the paperwork for Lillian's property claims. Cole worked alongside everyone else, his injured arm slowing him down only slightly. Lillian watched him interact with the townspeople, joking with Samuel, accepting advice from Tom, patiently explaining construction techniques to curious children, and saw him becoming part of the community in a way that wouldn't have been possible before. The violence had marked him, but it had also proven his character. These people knew now that he was someone who would fight for them, protect them, stand with them when things got hard. On the fourth day after the duel, Lillian stood looking at her property and was startled to realize that the new structure taking shape was better than what she'd lost. The foundation was stronger, the walls straighter, the design more thoughtful. It was as if the destruction had cleared away not just the old building, but old limitations, allowing for something better to emerge. "Penny for your thoughts," Cole said, coming to stand beside her with 2 cups of water from the well. "I was thinking that maybe some things need to burn down before they can be rebuilt properly," Lillian said, accepting the cup gratefully. "My house was always a patch job, cobbled together from whatever I could afford. This one is being built right from the foundation up." "Seems like a metaphor for something," Cole said with a slight smile. "Probably." She took a sip of water. "How's the arm?" "Sore but healing. Martha says I'll have a scar to match the one on my shoulder." "A match set. How romantic." But Lillian traced the bandage gently, her touch lingering. "I still can't believe you won. Lucas was so confident, so prepared. Part of me was certain—" She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "That I'd lose?" Cole turned to face her fully. "I was certain too, right up until Mayor Hobbs said 3. But then I looked across that street and saw Lucas, and I realized something. He was fighting to avenge the past. I was fighting to protect the future. That gave me an edge he couldn't match." "Philosophy won the gunfight?" "Love won the gunfight," Cole corrected. "Love and determination, and Samuel's excellent coaching." He set down his cup and took both her hands in his. "I meant what I said before. I'm done running, done looking over my shoulder, done letting the past control my future. I want to build something here with you, something permanent and real and worth fighting for." Lillian felt tears prick her eyes. "A house? A home, a life, a family, if you'll have me." He pulled her closer. "I know I'm not much of a prize. I'm a drifter with a violent past and not much money to my name. But I love you, Lillian Hart, and I promise to spend every day of the rest of my life trying to deserve you." "You already deserve me," she said softly. "You saved my life, stood by me through fires and threats and the worst days I've ever experienced, and you never once made me feel like I was something to be protected instead of someone to be partnered with. That's worth more than money or status or any of the things I thought I wanted when I was younger." She kissed him then, there in the ruins of her old life and the beginnings of her new one, surrounded by the sounds of construction and community. It was perfect in its imperfection, real in a way her old dreams had never been. When they broke apart, Samuel was calling Cole back to help with the roof beams, and Martha was waving Lillian over to discuss kitchen layouts. They separated reluctantly, returning to the work of building, but the promise hung between them like a golden thread connecting past to future. The week passed in a blur of activity. Lillian's house took shape with remarkable speed, the community working with the focused efficiency of people who'd raised more than one barn or building in their time. By the 6th day, the structure was largely complete, a small but solid house with 2 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a parlor that caught the morning light. "It's beautiful," Lillian said, standing in the empty front room and trying to imagine furniture and curtains and all the small details that would make it home. "It will be," Martha agreed, Once we get it furnished and decorated. I've collected enough donations to outfit most of it, and several ladies are sewing curtains as we speak. I don't know how to thank you all. You don't need to. This is what neighbors do. Martha squeezed her shoulder. Besides, we're all looking forward to the wedding. It's been too long since this town had something to celebrate instead of fear. The wedding. Lillian had been so focused on the house that she'd almost forgotten about the actual ceremony. Almost, but not quite. In quiet moments, she found herself thinking about what it would mean to stand before the community and pledge her life to Cole's, to take the final step from solitary survivor to beloved wife. It terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. The day before the wedding, the territorial marshal returned with news. Lucas's men had been tried and sentenced, some to prison, others to hang, depending on their crimes. The Garrett gang was officially disbanded, its members scattered or incarcerated. The bounty on Cole's head had been formally removed, his testimony and assistance in bringing the gang to justice earning him a full pardon for any outstanding warrants. You're free, the marshal told Cole as they stood on the porch of the new house. Legally and completely free. No more running, no more looking over your shoulder. You've earned a fresh start. Cole looked stunned, like he couldn't quite believe it. Just like that? Just like that. The governor himself signed the order. The marshal tipped his hat. Congratulations, Mr. Maddox, and good luck with the wedding tomorrow. I hope you and Miss Hart have many happy years together. After he left, Cole sat down hard on the porch steps, his face buried in his hands. Lillian sat beside him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. Are you all right? She asked quietly. I don't know, he admitted. For 2 years I've been defined by running, by the threat hanging over my head, and now it's just gone. I don't know who I am without it. You're Cole Maddox, Lillian said firmly. The man who saved my life. The man who stood up to outlaws and dueled at dawn and helped build a house with his injured arm because he was too stubborn to rest. The man I'm going to marry tomorrow, assuming you don't get cold feet. He looked up at her, eyes suspiciously bright. No chance of that. You're stuck with me now. Good. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Because I have plans for us. Big plans. We're going to finish this house, get married, maybe start a family if we're lucky. You'll find work, probably with Tom at the mill, since you're good with your hands. We'll become boring, respectable members of society. Boring sounds perfect, Cole said with feeling. I've had enough excitement to last a lifetime. They sat like that as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Tomorrow would bring the wedding, and after that a whole future stretching out before them, full of possibility and promise. But for now they simply sat together, alive and safe and home. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect spring morning that seemed designed for new beginnings. Lillian woke in Martha's spare room for the last time, butterflies dancing in her stomach, as the reality of what was about to happen set in. Martha helped her dress in a gown that had been cobbled together from donations and alterations, white muslin with blue ribbons, simple but lovely. Lillian's hair was pinned up with wildflowers that some of the town's children had gathered that morning, and Martha's mother's pearl earrings completed the ensemble. You look beautiful, Martha said, her eyes suspiciously bright. Cole's going to forget how to speak when he sees you. Let's hope he remembers his vows at least, Lillian said, trying for humor despite her nerves. The church was packed when they arrived. Nearly the entire town crammed into the pews. Lillian paused at the entrance, suddenly overwhelmed by the sea of faces, by the weight of what she was about to promise. Then she saw Cole standing at the front beside the preacher, and everything else faded away. He wore a new suit, another gift from the community, and looked uncomfortable but determined in the formal clothing. But his face when he saw her transformed into something soft and wondering, like he couldn't quite believe she was real. Lillian walked down the aisle with her head high and her hand on Samuel's arm. He'd volunteered to give her away since she had no family present. Each step felt monumental, carrying her away from the woman she'd been and toward the woman she was becoming. When she reached the front, Cole took her hand and didn't let go. The preacher began the ceremony, familiar words about love and commitment and the joining of two souls. Lillian heard them as if from a distance, too focused on Cole's face, on the way he was looking at her like she'd hung the moon and stars. Do you, Cole Maddox, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do, Cole said, his voice strong and clear. And do you, Lillian Hart, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part. Lillian thought about everything they'd been through to reach this moment. The massacre, the years of loneliness, the fires and threats and fear. She thought about Cole appearing on her porch like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known she'd made. She thought about his courage and his guilt, and the way he'd fought for her even when she'd insisted she didn't need protecting. I do, she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The preacher smiled. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Cole, you may kiss your bride. Cole cupped her face in his hands, gentle and reverent, and kissed her while the church erupted in applause and cheers. Lillian kissed him back, pouring 2 years of waiting and wanting and choosing each other over and over into that single moment. When they broke apart, both breathless and smiling, the preacher raised his hands for quiet. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Mr. and Mrs. Cole Maddox. More applause, more cheering. Lillian felt Cole's arm around her waist, felt the solid reality of being married, of having chosen this man and this life and this future. It was terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely right. The reception was held in the town square, tables laden with food that families had contributed, music from a makeshift band of local musicians, and enough goodwill to make Lillian's heart ache. People who'd been strangers or mere acquaintances weeks ago now embraced her as family, welcomed Cole as one of their own, and celebrated the union as if it were their own happiness at stake. Mayor Hobbs made a speech, naturally, full of platitudes about love conquering all and the strength of community. Samuel offered a toast that had everyone laughing and crying in equal measure. Martha pulled Lillian aside at one point to whisper that the community had taken up a collection to help furnish the new house, presenting her with a purse heavy with coins. We can't accept this, Lillian protested. You've all done so much already. You can and you will, Martha said firmly. Consider it a wedding gift from all of us. We take care of our own, Lillian, and like it or not, you're ours now. As the sun began to set and the party showed no signs of slowing, Cole pulled Lillian aside for a moment of relative privacy behind the church. Happy? He asked, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Deliriously, she admitted, though I keep waiting for something to go wrong. It seems too good to be true. It's not too good. It's exactly what we both fought for. He kissed her forehead. We earned this, Lillian, every moment of happiness, every peaceful day. We survived, and now we get to live. I like the sound of that. She wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head against his chest. Living, together, in our own home with our own future. Speaking of which, the house should be ready to move into tomorrow. Martha and the ladies finished furnishing it this afternoon while we were at the ceremony. Apparently they wanted to surprise us. They succeeded. Lillian laughed. I don't know whether to be touched or overwhelmed. Both seems appropriate. Cole's arms tightened around her. Thank you. For what? For being brave enough to answer that advertisement. For not sending me away when you could have. For standing by me through everything. For choosing this life, and me, even when it would have been easier to run. He pulled back to look at her. I don't deserve you, Lillian Maddox, but I promise to spend the rest of my life trying to. You already deserve me, she said, echoing her words from days before. And I you. We're equals in this, Cole. Partners. That's what makes it work. They stood like that as the celebration continued without them. Two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and chosen to build something beautiful from the ashes of their separate pasts. The future stretched before them, unknown and exciting, and theirs to shape. The next morning, they moved into their new house. True to Cole's word, it was fully furnished, a bed in the main bedroom, a small table in the kitchen, chairs and a settee in the parlor, even curtains on the windows. Lillian walked through each room in wonder, touching the simple furnishings and marveling at how quickly a house could become a home with the right people in it. "What do you think?" Cole asked, watching her reaction carefully. "I think it's perfect," she said honestly. "Not fancy, not grand, but perfect for us." They spent the day settling in, organizing their few belongings and christening each room with their presence. It was domestic and ordinary and absolutely wonderful after so much chaos and fear. By evening, they were exhausted but content, sitting on their new porch and watching the sun set over Crimson Valley. "Do you ever think about that day?" Lillian asked quietly. "The massacre. How different things would be if it had never happened." "Sometimes," Cole admitted, "but I try not to dwell on it. That day was terrible, and I wish those people hadn't died. But it also brought me to you, eventually, and I can't regret that, even knowing the cost. I used to have nightmares about it. Every night for months I'd wake up hearing gunshots and screaming." Lillian leaned against his shoulder. "But lately when I dream about that day, I don't dream about the violence. I dream about you, about the moment I saw you and knew I was going to survive. You would have survived anyway. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for." "Maybe, but I wouldn't have thrived. I wouldn't have built a life here, wouldn't have found the courage to take risks, wouldn't have become the person I am now. You gave me that, Cole, not just by saving my life, but by showing me what it meant to fight for something worth having." He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I spent 2 years running from that day, trying to forget it, treating it like a curse, but maybe it was the opposite. Maybe it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it led me here. To you. To home." Lillian turned to kiss him, soft and sweet and full of promise. "Then I guess we both got our fresh start after all. Just not the way either of us expected." "The best things never are," Cole said, and kissed her back. Over the following weeks and months, they settled into married life with surprising ease. Cole found work at Tom's mill, his skill with his hands and natural strength making him valuable. Lillian returned to her laundry and mending work, but now with a partner to share the burdens and joys of daily life. They made friends, became pillars of the small community, and slowly built the kind of life that neither had dared dream of during their years of loneliness. The scars remained, of course. Lillian still occasionally woke from nightmares of fire and gunshots. Cole still tensed when strangers rode into town, his hand instinctively moving toward a gun he no longer wore. But they faced those moments together, drawing strength from each other and from the life they'd built. A year after the wedding, Lillian stood on the same porch where she'd first seen Cole step off the stagecoach, one hand resting on her swollen belly. The baby was due in 2 months, a tangible symbol of their future together. Cole would be home soon from the mill, and Martha was coming over for dinner, and tomorrow they'd planned to visit the new schoolhouse where Lillian had just been hired as the teacher's assistant. It was an ordinary life, quiet and peaceful, and everything she'd never known she wanted. The woman who'd answered that mail-order husband advertisement seemed like a stranger now, lonely and desperate, and convinced she needed saving. This woman, this Lillian, knew better. She'd saved herself, with help from a man who'd respected her enough to stand beside her instead of in front of her. She heard hoofbeats and looked up to see Cole riding home on the horse they'd bought together last month. He waved when he saw her, his face breaking into the smile he reserved just for her, and she waved back. He couldn't be her mail-order husband, she thought with amusement, remembering her shocked words from that first day. He was so much more than that. He was her partner, her love, her home. He was the man who'd saved her life, and then let her save his in return. He was proof that sometimes the worst days could lead to the best futures, that love could bloom in the ruins of tragedy, and that fresh starts were possible even when the past tried desperately to hold on. Cole dismounted and jogged up the porch steps, kissing her soundly before placing a gentle hand on her belly. "How are my 2 favorite people?" "Your favorite person is fine," Lillian said, covering his hand with hers. "Your other favorite person is kicking like a mule and making me crave pickles at odd hours." He laughed. "I'll add pickles to the shopping list. Anything else you need?" "Just this," she said, gesturing to the house, the town, the life they'd built. "Just you and me and whatever comes next. That I can definitely provide." He kissed her again, soft and lingering. "I love you, Mrs. Maddox." "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for saving mine right back. They stood on the porch as the sun set over Crimson Valley, two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful from the ashes. The future stretched before them, full of possibility and promise, and for the first time in either of their lives, neither was afraid of what it might hold. Because they'd face it together, the way they faced everything else. As equals. As partners. As two souls who'd been lost and alone until fate, disguised as a mail-order husband advertisement and a stagecoach massacre, had brought them together. It wasn't the story Lillian had expected to tell when she'd written that advertisement. It was better. Messier, more dangerous, more real, but infinitely better. And as she felt her baby kick beneath her hand and her husband's arms around her, and the warm New Mexico breeze on her face, she sent up a silent prayer of thanks for every twist and turn that had led her to this moment. The door she'd never expected to open had led her home, and that, she thought with a smile, was the greatest gift of all.